Hello beautiful people. Welcome to Ben 10. In today's episode, we explore, what if Ben 10 became a Quirk user in My Hero Academia? Hit like, subscribe, and join our community of story lovers. Let's begin. Chapter 1, Wrong Universe, Same Job. The first thing Ben Tennyson noticed was the smell. Not the ozone anesthetic tang of a teleportation gone wrong, or the sulfur stink of a null void breach. This was simpler than that. Fish. Concrete dust. Exhaust fumes. A city, obviously, but not his city. Not Bellwood. He was lying on his back in an alley, wedged between a dumpster and a stack of flattened cardboard boxes, staring up at a strip of pale sky between two buildings. His head throbbed like someone had used it for batting practice. The Omnitrix sat heavy on his left wrist, its faceplate dark, cycling through a slow green pulse he'd never seen before, like it was recalibrating, searching for a signal it couldn't find. Ben sat up. Groaned. Pressed the heel of his hand against his temple and waited for the world to stop tilting. Okay, he muttered. Okay. So. That happened. What had happened? He tried to rewind. There'd been a fight, Vilgax, because it was always Vilgax eventually, and some kind of device. A dimensional anchor, Azimuth had called it, warning him not to let it destabilize. And then a flash, white and total, swallowing everything, and then, fish. Concrete dust. Cardboard. He got to his feet, brushed off his green jacket, and tapped the Omnitrix. The faceplate flickered, then stabilized into its familiar holographic display. Alien silhouettes scrolled past in their usual carousel. Heat blast. 4 arms. XLR-8. Diamond head. All present and accounted for, far as he could tell. Well, at least you're still working, he said to it. The Omnitrix didn't respond, which was normal, but the continued slow pulse beneath the display wasn't. It was doing something. Processing. Analyzing. Ben stepped out of the alley into a street that confirmed every suspicion he had and raised about 40 new ones. The city was dense, sprawling, distinctly Japanese. He'd been to Japan enough times to recognize the signage, the architecture, the vending machines on every corner. But the people were wrong. Not wrong in a bad way, just wrong in an impossible way. A woman walked past him with literal vines growing from her scalp instead of hair, flowers blooming and closing in rhythm with her breathing. A kid on the opposite sidewalk had skin that was entirely transparent, his skeletal structure and musculature on full display, earbuds jammed into holes where his ears should have been. A man at a crosswalk had 4 arms, not like 4 arms, not massive and red, but just a regular guy in a business suit with 2 extra limbs, using one to hold a briefcase, one for his phone, and 2 to adjust his tie. Ben stared. He'd seen weirder. He'd been weirder. But this wasn't alien, these were humans. Modified, mutated, evolved. He didn't know. He watched a woman with moth wings fold them neatly against her back as she entered a convenience store, and a delivery driver whose head was literally on fire, just casually, not painfully, park his scooter and pull out a stack of packages. Different dimension, Ben said to himself, the certainty settling like a stone in his gut. Definitely a different dimension. He wasn't panicking. Panic was for people who hadn't been flung across reality before. This was maybe the 4th time. 5th. The routine was always the same, figure out where you are, figure out the rules, find a way home. The Omnitrix was operational, he was in one piece, and the city didn't seem to be on fire. Things could be worse. He started walking, hands in his jacket pockets, taking it in. The signage was in Japanese, but the Omnitrix had a universal translator function buried in its software, Azimuth's gift to a wielder who kept ending up in places where nobody spoke English. He tapped his wrist twice, a specific pattern, and the characters on the signs around him shimmered and resolved into something he could read. Muzutafu Shopping District. Tatooine Station, 300 m. Advertisements plastered across the side of a bus featured a muscular blonde man with a grin so wide it looked structural, giving a thumbs up next to a block of text that read, "All Might says, plus Ultra. Go beyond with Daiichi Insurance." All Might, Ben read aloud. He filed the name away. Celebrity. Politician. The guy looked like he could bench press the bus his face was plastered on. He kept walking. The Omnitrix's pulse was slowing, settling into something more measured. Whatever it was processing, it was making progress. Ben trusted it. The thing was the most sophisticated piece of technology in his universe, at least. He had no idea what the tech ceiling was here, but he doubted anyone had built anything that came close. 3 blocks from the alley where he'd woken up, he found a park, a small green square wedged between apartment towers, with benches and a fountain and a few scraggly trees. He sat down, pulled up the Omnitrix's diagnostic mode, and started reading. The data was dense, but the summary was clear enough. The Omnitrix had detected the dimensional displacement immediately upon arrival and had been scanning the local environment ever since. The atmospheric composition was near identical to his Earth. Gravity, electromagnetic spectrum, solar radiation, all within normal parameters. But the biological readings were off the charts. The Omnitrix was detecting genetic anomalies in approximately 80% of the human population within its scanning range. Not random mutations, structured ones. Consistent expressions of metagenic traits, as if someone had introduced a single catalyst into the human genome and let natural selection do the rest over several generations. So everyone here has powers, Ben murmured, scrolling through the data. Not everyone. 80%. And they're genetic. Inherited. He paused on a particular readout. The Omnitrix had already begun cataloging the local metagene expressions it could detect, cross-referencing them against its database of over 1 million alien species. It was finding partial matches everywhere. Pyrokinesis. Bioelectric generation. Structural mutation. Pheromone manipulation. Each one a pale echo of something an alien species could do at full power. Like budget versions of my aliens, Ben said, and immediately felt a little guilty about it. These people hadn't asked for the comparison. The Omnitrix pulsed once, green and steady, and a new line of text appeared on the display, local dimensional anchor, not detected. Return vector, calculating. Estimated time, unknown. Unknown. Great. Love that. He dismissed the display and leaned back on the bench. The sky was clear, the temperature mild. Early afternoon, maybe. He was stuck in a dimension full of people with genetic superpowers, with no way home and no timeline for getting one. He'd had worse Tuesdays. The sound reached him before the screaming did, a low, wet, rumbling impact, like a water balloon the size of a car hitting pavement. Then the screams kicked in, sharp and panicked, cutting through the ambient noise of the city like a knife. Ben was on his feet before the second scream. He moved toward the noise at a jog, weaving through pedestrians who were moving the opposite direction, away from whatever was happening, hands over their mouths, some crying, some just running with the blank-faced efficiency of people who'd done this before. He caught fragments as he pushed through. Villain attack, someone call a hero, it's got someone, he rounded a corner and saw it. A massive shape of dark green sludge, vaguely humanoid, filled most of the intersection ahead. It was enormous, 12-15 feet tall, bubbling and shifting, its surface rippling with something that looked almost like muscle. 2 crude eyes bulged from what passed for its head, yellow and furious, and a mouth full of jagged sludge teeth gaped open in a roar that sprayed filth across the storefronts on either side. And inside it, half absorbed, struggling and choking, was a kid. Blonde, spiky hair. Maybe 14, 15 years old. His face was contorted in rage and terror as the sludge crawled over him, filling his mouth and nose, cutting off his air. His hands, palms crackling with small explosions, pops of light and heat that sizzled against the sludge without doing much, flailed wildly, but every blast just rippled through the monster's body and reformed. A crowd had gathered at what they clearly considered a safe distance. Ben scanned the scene in a heartbeat. There were adults in costumes, heroes, he figured, given the outfits, standing at the perimeter. A guy made of wood. A woman in a skin-tight suit. A man who seemed to be able to stretch his fingers into long cables. They were just standing there. "Why isn't anyone?" Ben started, and then he heard one of them say it, loud enough to carry, "We need to wait for a hero with a compatible quirk. Our abilities aren't suited for this type of villain." The kid inside the sludge monster choked, and a bubble of air burst from his mouth, and his eyes were starting to go glassy. Something white-hot and familiar slid into Ben's chest. Not anger, exactly. Older than that. Deeper. The absolute, bone-level refusal to watch someone die while people with the power to act stood around waiting for the right person to show up. He didn't think about it. He never thought about it. That was the thing people never understood about Ben Tennyson. He'd been doing this since he was 10 years old, and the calculation had never once been complicated. Someone needs help. You can help. So you help. He slapped the Omnitrix. The dial popped up, holographic silhouette spinning. He found the one he wanted in a fraction of a second, muscle memory, instinct, 10 years of practice, and slammed it down. The transformation was instant. Green light erupted from his body, bright enough to make the nearest bystanders flinch and shield their eyes. His skeleton restructured, his mass redistributed, his molecular composition rewrote itself in ways that would make a physicist weep. In less than a second, Ben Tennyson was gone, and in his place stood a 7-foot semi-transparent figure of blue crystal and frozen vapor, a spectral tail where legs should have been, wings of translucent ice folded against his back, yellow eyes glowing behind a moth-like face. Big Chill. The crowd gasped. The heroes at the perimeter spun toward him, eyes wide. Someone screamed, thinking it was a second villain. Ben didn't care. He was already moving. He went intangible, one of Big Chill's best tricks, phasing through solid matter like it wasn't there, and shot forward, passing through 2 parked cars and a fire hydrant like a ghost. The sludge villain saw him coming and roared, rearing up, trying to make itself bigger and more threatening. Ben flew straight into it. The sludge closed around him for an instant, warm, foul, suffocating, and then his intangibility kicked in fully and he was passing through it like it was air. He found the kid in the center, wrapped in layers of muck, barely conscious. Ben solidified just enough to grab him, arms under armpits, firm grip, and then went intangible again, pulling the kid through the sludge villain's body and out the other side. They hit the pavement on the far side of the intersection, the kid collapsing to his hands and knees, retching and gasping, great heaving lungfuls of air. Ben materialized fully beside him, one spectral hand on the kid's back. "You're okay," he said, and Big Chill's voice was eerie and resonant, breath fogging in the air despite the mild temperature. "Breathe. You're out." The kid, blonde, wild-eyed, furious even while choking, looked up at him with an expression that was equal parts gratitude and outrage, like he was angry at himself for needing to be saved. "I didn't, I had it," he coughed, sludge splattering the concrete. "I had it, sure you did," Ben said, not unkindly. He turned back to the sludge villain. It was reforming, pulling itself back together, that crude mouth twisting into something like a snarl. "You think that's gonna stop me?" it gurgled. "I'll just grab another hostage." "There's plenty of meat," Ben phased back toward it, floating a foot off the ground. "Yeah," he said. "No." He inhaled, a long, deep, impossible breath that pulled air from a 20-foot radius, and then exhaled. The freeze breath hit the sludge villain like a wall of Arctic wind. Not just cold. Absolute zero cold, the kind of temperature that didn't exist naturally on any Earth. The sludge flash froze from the outside in, crystallizing in layers, the villain's scream cutting off mid-syllable as its entire body solidified into a statue of dark green ice. The eyes, still visible beneath the frost, rolled in their sockets, alive, conscious, but completely immobilized. The entire thing had taken maybe 12 seconds. Silence. The kind of silence that only happens when a crowd of people simultaneously forgets how to speak. Ben floated there for a moment, examining his work, making sure the freeze was thorough and stable. Then the Omnitrix timed him out, green flash, shrinking, restructuring, and he was Ben Tennyson again, a teenager in a green jacket standing in front of a frozen sludge monster in the middle of a Japanese intersection. The silence held for another 2 heartbeats. Then it shattered. Everyone was shouting at once. The crowd surged forward, then pulled back, then surged again. The heroes at the perimeter broke from their stupor and rushed in. The wood guy was already on his phone, the stretchy-fingered man was setting up a wider cordon, the woman in the suit was checking on the blonde kid, who was shoving her away and insisting he was fine. And in the middle of it all, Ben stood there, hands in his pockets, watching the chaos with the calm of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. A different kind of movement caught his eye. Not from the crowd, from behind a parked car at the edge of the intersection. A kid, smaller than the blonde one, with a mess of dark green hair and wide, shining eyes that looked like they were about to overflow. He was clutching a notebook to his chest like a lifeline, and he was staring at Ben with an expression that Ben had seen before on fans, on rescued civilians, on people who just watched the impossible happen. But this was different. This kid wasn't just impressed. He was analyzing. His lips were moving rapidly, muttering something too quiet to hear, and his eyes were darting between Ben and the frozen villain and the Omnitrix on Ben's wrist, cataloging everything. The kid took a step forward, then stopped himself. Took another step. Stopped again. His whole body was vibrating with the effort of not sprinting over. Ben raised an eyebrow and walked toward him. "You okay? You weren't in the crowd when that thing was, how did you do that?" The words exploded out of the kid like they'd been physically restrained. "You're Quirk, I've never seen, you were intangible and you could freeze things and you could fly, that's at least 3 separate abilities operating simultaneously, is it a transformation type?" "It has to be transformation type, your entire physical structure changed, but the ice breath suggests an emitter component too, and the intangibility is that molecular phasing? Can you reduce your own molecular density? Because that would explain, whoa. Ben held up both hands, half laughing. "Slow down. Breathe. Like, literally, take a breath." The kid went scarlet. Sorry. I'm sorry, I do that, I'm a hero nerd, I analyze quirks, sorry. Don't be sorry, it's cool. But maybe start with your name. Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya. He bowed, quick and jerky, and nearly dropped his notebook. "And you, who are you? I've never seen you before, and I know every hero in the top 100, and you're not, are you from another country? Is that why, Ben Tennyson?" He stuck out his hand. Midoriya stared at it for a second, then shook it with both of his, pumping vigorously. And that wasn't a quirk. Midoriya's brain visibly short-circuited. What? Long story. Really long. Like, you might want to sit down, long. Ben glanced over his shoulder. The heroes were managing the scene now, and he could hear sirens approaching. More heroes, probably. Or cops. Either way, people who'd want to ask him questions he didn't feel like answering yet. "Hey, is there somewhere nearby we can talk? Somewhere that isn't about to be crawling with officials?" Midoriya blinked. Looked at the scene behind Ben. Looked back at Ben. His expression cycled through about 15 emotions in 2 seconds, confusion, excitement, suspicion, more excitement, a flash of anxiety, and then a determination that seemed too big for his small frame. "I know a place," he said. "There's a park, a few blocks from here. It's usually empty this time of day. Lead the way, Midoriya." They walked. Behind them, the frozen sludge villain gleamed in the afternoon sun, already being surrounded by heroes and police tape and news drones. Ben didn't look back. Midoriya kept glancing at him sideways, notebook clutched tight, like he was afraid Ben might disappear if he blinked. The park was small and quiet, different from the one Ben had rested in earlier, this one tucked beneath an overpass, with a rusted playground and a bench that had seen better decades. They sat. Midoriya opened his notebook to a fresh page, pen already in hand, and then caught himself and closed it. Sorry. Habit. Go ahead and write if you want. I don't mind. Ben leaned back, stretching his legs out. So. Izuku Midoriya. You said you're a hero nerd? The kid's face lit up, and for a second the anxiety vanished entirely. I want to be a hero. More than anything. I've studied every hero I can find, their quirks, their fighting styles, their rescue records. I have 13 notebooks full of analysis. He patted the one in his lap. This is number 14. 13 notebooks. That's dedication. Ben meant it. He recognized something in this kid, the same obsessive, all-consuming love for heroism that Ben himself had felt at 10 years old, staring at the Omnitrix for the first time. So what's your quirk? The light went out. Just like that, like someone had flipped a switch. Midoriya's shoulders curled inward, his grip tightening on the notebook, his gaze dropping to the ground. I don't have one, he said quietly. I'm quirkless. Ben waited. He could tell there was more. About 20% of the population doesn't develop a quirk, Midoriya continued, and he sounded like he was reciting something he'd said 100 times, a script he'd memorized to make the explanation easier. Most people manifest by age 4. I went to the doctor when I was 5, and they told me I had 2 joints in my pinky toe, which is a marker for, anyway. I'm quirkless. I've been quirkless my whole life. Everyone says I can't be a hero. Everyone's wrong, Ben said. Midoriya looked up sharply, eyes wide. What? I said everyone's wrong. You don't need a superpower to be a hero. I met a guy once, no powers, no tech, nothing. Just a regular guy with really good aim and a willingness to jump in front of things. Saved more people in a single day than some of the most powerful beings I've ever met. He paused, thinking of Grandpa Max, of Rook, of a dozen humans and aliens who'd proved that courage wasn't a genetic trait. Powers help. I'm not gonna lie and say they don't. But the thing that makes someone a hero? That's right here. He tapped his chest. And you've got it. I saw you back there, you were about to run toward that thing, weren't you? Before I stepped in. Midoriya's eyes were doing the overflowing thing again. He wiped them furiously with his sleeve. I was. I saw Kaken, the boy trapped in the sludge, I saw his face, and my legs just moved, and, that's it. That's the whole thing. Your legs moved. That's what a hero is. Midoriya was crying now, openly, silently, tears tracking down his freckled cheeks. He didn't try to hide it. Ben let him have the moment. The kid had obviously been carrying this for a long time, the weight of a dream everyone told him was impossible. After a minute, Midoriya wiped his face again, took a shaky breath, and opened his notebook. Will you tell me about your power? About what you did back there? You said it wasn't a quirk. It's not. Ben held up his left wrist. The Omnitrix sat there, green and black, its faceplate glowing softly. This is the Omnitrix. It's a piece of alien technology, the most powerful in existence, where I come from. It lets me transform into different alien species. Over 1 million of them, at last count, though I've only personally used maybe 60 or 70. Midoriya's pen had frozen an inch above the page. Alien, he repeated. As in extraterrestrial. From other planets. Other galaxies, even. Ben could see the gears turning behind those green eyes, the worldview reshuffling to accommodate information that didn't fit any existing category. The form I used back there is called Big Chill. Necrophrygian, that's the species name. They can fly, phase through matter, and generate extreme cold. But I've got a lot of others. XLR-8 for speed. Heat Blast for fire. Diamond Head, living crystal, nearly indestructible. For arms, which is pretty much what it sounds like. The pen was moving now, furiously. Midoriya's muttering kicked into high gear as he wrote and sketched and annotated simultaneously. Multiple transformation states, each with distinct physiological characteristics, alien DNA templates. The device acts as a repository and transformation catalyst. You're doing it again. Sorry. The pen didn't stop. Ben laughed. He genuinely liked this kid. Look, I'll give you the full rundown later, but I need to ask you some questions too. Because I'm not from around here, and I mean that in the most literal way possible. He told Midoriya the abbreviated version. Different dimension. A device that punched him through realities. No way home yet. He left out the details that wouldn't make sense without a semester of interdimensional physics, and focused on the essentials. He was stranded, he didn't know this world's rules, and he needed someone who could bring him up to speed. Midoriya, to his credit, took it remarkably well. His eyes got progressively wider, and his muttering got progressively faster, but he didn't bolt or call Ben crazy. A kid who'd grown up in a world where people could shoot fire from their hands and turn into giants had a high threshold for the impossible. So the abilities everyone has here, Ben said. Quirks. What's the deal? Everyone's born with them? About 80% of the global population, Midoriya said, slipping into lecture mode with the easy confidence of someone discussing their favorite subject. They started appearing a few generations ago. The first recorded case was a luminescent baby born in Qingqing, China. Since then, they've spread and diversified. Some are simple, minor physical mutations, small abilities. Some are incredibly powerful. They're genetic, usually inherited from one or both parents, sometimes a combination. And you've got a whole hero system built around them. Pro-heroes, yeah. It's a licensed profession. You need a hero license to legally use your quirk in public for hero work. There are hero agencies, rankings, schools that train you. Wait. Ben held up a hand. Licensed. You need a license to save people. To use your quirk in combat, officially, yes. Unlicensed quirk use is illegal. Midoriya nodded, and he must have seen something shift in Ben's expression, because he added quickly, I mean, there's a good Samaritan clause, technically, and in emergencies, I just used my powers in public. In front of a crowd. With news drones overhead. Ben said it flatly, not with worry, more like he was noting the absurdity. Am I gonna get arrested? Maybe. Probably not. You saved Kaken, everyone saw it, and you're not, I mean, they'll want to talk to you, figure out your quirk registration, but, I don't have a quirk registration. I don't have any registration. I don't exist in this world's records, Midoriya. I literally appeared here an hour ago. The full weight of Ben's situation seemed to land on Midoriya all at once. The muttering stopped. The pen stopped. He looked at Ben, really looked at him, and Ben saw the moment the hero nerd analysis gave way to simple human empathy. You're alone here, Midoriya said softly. You don't have anyone. I've been alone before. It's fine. It's not fine. Midoriya said it with a firmness that surprised them both. He straightened up, jaw set, and Ben saw a flash of the hero this kid was clearly going to become, quirk or no quirk. You helped Kaken. You saved him without hesitating, without asking who he was or waiting for permission. And now you need help. So I'll help you. I don't know how much I can do, but I'll help. Ben looked at him for a long moment. Small, scrawny, quirkless, crying 5 minutes ago, currently offering to help an interdimensional stranger navigate an entire world. You know what, Midoriya? I think you're gonna be a great hero. The kid's lip trembled. He bit it. Nodded. Thank you. They talked for another hour as the afternoon light turned golden and long. Midoriya was a goldmine of information. The kid hadn't been exaggerating about his obsession. He laid out the hero system in detail, the rankings, the agencies, the major players. All Might, the man from the bus advertisement, turned out to be the #1 hero, the symbol of peace, a figure of almost mythological stature. Endeavor, #2, with a fire quirk. Best Genist, Hawks, Edge Shot. An entire ecosystem of professional heroes, villains, and the civilians caught between them. And UA? Ben asked. You mentioned it before. UA High School. The most prestigious hero academy in Japan, maybe the world. All Might went there. Most of the top heroes went there. Midoriya's voice had gone wistful. The entrance exam is in 10 months. I've been training. Even though I'm quirkless. I thought maybe, if I tried hard enough, 10 months, huh? Ben filed that away too. A school for heroes in training. Resources. Information. Maybe people who could help him figure out the science of how he'd ended up here. What do they teach? Combat training, rescue operations, hero law, support equipment development. Midoriya caught himself. Why? Are you thinking about a lot of things? Ben stood, stretched. The sun was getting low, and he was starting to realize he had a very immediate problem. Hey, Midoriya. Random question. You know anywhere a guy with no money, no ID, and no permanent address can crash for the night? Midoriya stood too, shoving his notebook into his backpack. His face had that determined look again. You can stay at my apartment. My mom won't mind, well, she'll mind at first, but once I explain, she's really kind. She'll understand. I can't just show up at your mom's place. You saved someone's life today. And you need somewhere to stay. My mom would never forgive me if I left someone who needed help out on the street. He squared his shoulders, and it was almost funny, this small, freckled kid trying to project authority. Almost. Please. Let me help. Ben considered it. He had the Omnitrix, he could survive anywhere. Gray matter could hotwire an ATM if he needed cash. Big Chill could phase into an empty building. He didn't need charity. But Midoriya wasn't offering charity. He was offering the same thing Ben had given him 20 minutes ago, basic human decency, extended without conditions. Okay, Ben said. But I'm helping with dishes. Midoriya smiled, a real one, wide and unguarded. Deal. They walked through the city as the streetlights came on, and Midoriya pointed out landmarks and explained things Ben needed to know. The kid was easy to talk to once you got past the initial anxiety, smart, thoughtful, with a dry humor that surfaced unexpectedly. He asked Ben about his aliens the way other kids might ask about a video game, rapid-fire questions delivered with genuine fascination. So when you transform, do you retain your full consciousness? Your personality? Fully me. I think, I talk, I make bad jokes. I'm just in a different body. And each form has its own set of abilities, based on the alien species biology. Exactly. Heat blast generates and controls fire because pyronites are living magma. XLR-8 can run faster than the eye can track because kinecelerons are built for speed, enhanced musculature, reduced friction, a visor that protects their eyes at high velocity. Every form is a complete biological package. That's incredible. It's not just one ability, it's hundreds of complete power sets. There's no quirk in recorded history that comes close to that kind of versatility. The Omnitrix wasn't built for fighting, originally. It was built as a tool for understanding, a way for the creator to preserve the DNA of every sapient species in the galaxy and let the user walk a mile in their shoes. Literally. The combat applications were kind of a bonus. Midoriya was writing as he walked, somehow navigating the sidewalk without looking up. Who created it? A Galvan named Azimuth. Smartest being in my universe. About 5 inches tall, looks like a gray frog, has the personality of a tenured professor who's done with everyone's nonsense. Ben grinned at the memory. He'd hate this world. Too many variables. He likes things orderly. They reached Midoriya's apartment building, a modest complex in a residential district, nothing fancy but well kept. Midoriya paused at the entrance, took a breath, and looked at Ben. My mom might cry, he warned. Noted. Midoriya's mom did cry. Inko Midoriya was a small, round-faced woman with green hair that matched her son's, and when Midoriya explained, in a carefully edited version that left out the interdimensional part and focused on, he saved someone from a villain attack and he's new to the city and needs a place to stay, she burst into tears, grabbed Ben's hands, thanked him approximately 40 times, and immediately started cooking enough food for 6 people. Ben sat at their small kitchen table and ate katsudon and rice and pickled vegetables while Inko fussed over him and Midoriya watched with barely concealed amusement. The apartment was small and warm and filled with All Might merchandise, posters, figurines, a throw pillow on the couch with the hero's face on it. Your son's a good kid, Mrs. Midoriya, Ben said between bites, and meant it. Inko teared up again. He is. He really is. He's always wanted to help people, ever since he was little, even without she caught herself, glanced at Midoriya, and changed direction. Even when it was difficult. After dinner, Midoriya set up a futon in his room, a space so plastered with hero memorabilia that it looked like a shrine. All Might posters covered every wall. Action figures lined the shelves. Notebooks were stacked in towers on the desk. So, Ben said, lying on the futon and staring at the ceiling while Midoriya sat cross-legged on his bed. All Might. He's the real deal. The realest deal. There was no irony in Midoriya's voice, no hedging. Pure, absolute conviction. He's saved more people than anyone in history. When he shows up, people stop being afraid. He smiles, and you know it's going to be okay. That's what I want to be. Someone who makes people feel safe just by being there. Ben turned his head to look at the kid. Green hair, freckles, big eyes, no powers. 14 years old with 13 notebooks full of hope and a dream the entire world had told him to give up. You remind me of someone, Ben said. Who? Me. When I was 10. Before I found the Omnitrix. He held up his wrist, the green glow soft in the dim room. I was just a kid on a road trip with my grandpa. No powers, no plan. Just a kid who wanted things to be fair. And then this thing landed in front of me, literally fell out of the sky, and everything changed. Midoriya was quiet for a moment. Do you think things like that can happen? That someone who doesn't have power can just stumble into it? Ben thought about it honestly. I think power finds the people who'll use it right. Not always. Not perfectly. But if you put yourself out there, if you keep pushing, things have a way of showing up when you need them. That sounds like something All Might would say. Then All Might and I would get along. Midoriya laughed softly, and then they were quiet for a while, the apartment settling into nighttime sounds, Inko washing dishes, a cat yowling somewhere outside, the distant hum of the city. Tennyson-san. Ben. Just Ben. Ben. What are you going to do? Here, I mean. In this world. Ben stared at the ceiling. The Omnitrix pulsed gently on his wrist, still working, still calculating, still searching for a way home that might or might not exist. Same thing I've always done, he said. Help people. Figure things out as I go. And if someone's in trouble and I can do something about it? He turned the Omnitrix faceplate toward him, and the green light caught his eyes. I'm going to do something about it. I don't care if I have a license, a registration, or a permission slip from the mayor. That's not how this works. Not for me. Midoriya didn't say anything for a long time. When Ben glanced over, the kid was writing in his notebook again, filling a page with dense, rapid handwriting, and he was smiling. They slept. The city hummed. And somewhere across Muzutafu, in a bar that didn't appear on any map, a television replayed footage of that afternoon's incident for the third time. The frozen sludge villain. The flash of green light. The figure that appeared, alien, impossible, beautiful and terrifying, and dismantled the threat in seconds. A hand reached out and paused the footage on the moment of transformation. The green flash, caught mid-burst, Ben Tennyson's silhouette dissolving into something else. Play it again, said a voice like gravel and rust. The footage rewound. Played. The green flash. The transformation. Again. Rewind. Play. Flash. Transformation. Behind the bar, Kurogyri polished a glass and said nothing. He'd learned when to be silent. The figure sitting at the bar, thin, pale, a hand pressed to his face, fingers twitching with an idle destructive energy, leaned closer to the screen. That's not a quirk, Tomura Shigaraki said. No, agreed Kurogyri. So what is it? Unknown. The Hero Commission has no records matching that individual or that ability. He appeared at the scene without warning, acted without authorization, and disappeared before authorities could. He's strong. Shigaraki said it flatly, the way someone might note the weather. Not impressed. Calculating. His fingers drummed against the bar, and where they touched, the wood grayed and crumbled, hairline fractures spreading like veins. Really strong. He froze that sludge villain in seconds. The heroes on scene couldn't even figure out how to engage it. Shall I report this to Sensei? Shigaraki was quiet for a moment. On the screen, the frozen sludge villain glittered in the sunlight, and a green-jacketed teenager walked away from it with his hands in his pockets. Yeah, Shigaraki said. Report it. Tell him we might need to adjust the plan. The screen flickered. Kurogyri reached for a phone. Miles away, in a room that no one knew existed, in a facility buried beneath layers of concrete and misdirection, a man with no face sat in a chair and listened to the report with patient, absolute attention. He didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. When the report finished, All for One sat in the silence for a while. He turned the information over in his mind, a mind that had been scheming and planning and taking for over 200 years. Not a quirk. A device. Alien technology that allowed the user to transform into different species, each with distinct abilities. Appeared from nowhere, with no history and no records. All for One smiled. It was a terrible thing, that smile, made worse by the ruined landscape of his face. Keep watching him, he said. Learn everything you can. What he can do. What he can't do. And most importantly, he flexed his fingers, and in his palm, a dozen stolen quirks flickered to life and died, briefly, like fireflies. Find out if it can be taken. The line went dead. The room was silent. All for One sat in the dark and thought about a boy with a watch that could change the world, and he was very, very patient. Morning hit Muzutafu like a truck full of sunshine, and Ben woke to the smell of something incredible. Inko Midoriya, he was quickly learning, expressed every emotion through cooking. Worry was miso soup with extra tofu. Gratitude was tamagoyaki rolled so perfectly it could have been in a magazine. Nervous hospitality was all of the above plus rice, pickled plum, grilled fish, and a fruit salad. You didn't have to do all this, Mrs. Midoriya, Ben said, sitting at the table where the spread barely fit. You saved a boy's life yesterday, she said, in a tone that made it clear the discussion was over. Midoriya appeared from the hallway, already dressed, hair a disaster, notebook under one arm. He looked like he'd been awake for hours. Knowing him, he probably had been. I made some calls, Midoriya said, sitting down and immediately reaching for rice. Well, I posted on some forums. Hero forums, analysis sites. Nobody knows who you are. The video from yesterday is everywhere, but the Hero Commission hasn't released a statement. That probably means they're still figuring out how to classify what happened. Good. I'd rather get ahead of that than let them come to me. Ben ate efficiently, thinking. Who's the person to talk to? If I wanted to get in front of the Hero establishment directly, bypass the bureaucracy, go straight to someone with real authority and an open mind? Midoriya didn't hesitate. All might. But he's nearly impossible to get a meeting with. What about the school? UA. You said the entrance exam is in 10 months. Who runs it? The principal. Nizu. He'd be perfect. He's a genius. Literally, his quirk is superintelligence. He's an animal, we're not really sure what kind, but he runs UA and he's known for being unconventional. A superintelligent animal runs the best hero school in the country. Japan is, like that. Ben grinned. I think I might like this place. The plan formed over breakfast. Midoriya walked him through the logistics, where UA was, how to approach, what channels existed for non-standard inquiries. Ben listened, asked sharp questions, and filed everything away. He had no intention of sneaking in, hiding, or being subtle about any of this. That had never been his style. By 9 a.m., he was standing outside the gates of UA High School. The campus was massive. The main building alone was bigger than some military installations Ben had seen, a gleaming structure of glass and steel shaped, somewhat absurdly, like the letters U and A. The ground stretched out behind it, training facilities, dormitories, support workshops. He could see robots through a chain-link fence, enormous humanoid machines patrolling what looked like a mock city. The front gate was monitored by cameras and, Ben's practiced eye noted, at least 3 concealed turrets that were probably loaded with something non-lethal. Probably. He walked straight up to the intercom panel and pressed the button. A beat of silence. Then a voice, crisp and professional, UA High School is not currently accepting visitors. If you have business with the school, please contact our administrative office during, my name is Ben Tennyson. I'm the guy from the sludge villain incident yesterday. I need to speak with Principal Nizu. Tell him it's about something that's not a quirk. Silence again. Longer this time. Ben waited, patient. He'd learned a long time ago that dropping the right piece of information could open doors faster than any amount of force. The gate clicked. Swung open. Please follow the illuminated path to the main building, the voice said, and there was a new note in it, curiosity, maybe, or caution. You will be escorted from the entrance. Ben walked in, hands in his pockets, looking up at the towering facade of the most prestigious hero academy in the world with the easy confidence of someone who'd walked into much more intimidating buildings and walked out again. Whatever this world was going to throw at him, he was ready. He was Ben Tennyson. He'd been ready since he was 10. The doors opened. He stepped inside. And somewhere, deep in the building, a small white animal behind a very large desk sipped tea from a comically tiny cup and smiled a smile that was far too sharp for something that cute. Well now, Nizu said to no one in particular, pulling up the security feed on his monitor. This should be fascinating. Chapter 2, The System and the Stranger. The hallways of UA were wider than they needed to be, and Ben figured that was on purpose. When your student body included people who could grow to 30 feet tall or sprout wings on a whim, you designed for the outliers. The floors gleamed. The walls were lined with display cases, trophies, photographs, hero costumes preserved behind glass like relics in a museum. The faces in the photographs grinned out at him with the polished confidence of people who'd graduated into fame. His escort was a woman in a tan trench coat with wild dark hair and bloodshot eyes that screamed sleep deprivation. She'd introduced herself as Eraserhead, which Ben assumed was a hero name, and then hadn't said another word. She walked 3 paces ahead, hands in her pockets, radiating the energy of someone who resented being awake. "Nice place," Ben offered. "Nothing. Very clean. Good lighting." A grunt that might have been acknowledgement or might have been a suppressed yawn. "You always this chatty?" Eraserhead stopped in front of a set of double doors, turned, and looked at Ben with an expression so flat it could have been used as a level. "I was pulled out of my sleeping bag for this. Whatever you're selling, sell it fast." "I'm not selling anything. Everyone's selling something." She pushed the door open. "He's here." The office beyond was simultaneously exactly what Ben expected and nothing like it. It was large, well-appointed, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the campus grounds. Bookshelves lined 2 walls, packed with volumes in Japanese and English and several other languages. A massive desk dominated the center, covered in neat stacks of paper, a laptop, 3 different tablets, and a tea set that looked like it cost more than Midoriya's apartment. Behind the desk, in a chair that was slightly too large for him, sat a small white animal. Ben had been told Nizu was an animal. He'd expected something like a mascot, cute, maybe a little absurd. What he got was something else entirely. Nizu was maybe 2 feet tall, white-furred, with a long tail and beady black eyes that held an intelligence so sharp it was almost uncomfortable. He wore a suit and tie, paws folded on the desk in front of him, and his smile was the kind that suggested he'd already figured out the end of a conversation that hadn't started yet. "Ben Tennyson." Nizu's voice was light, bright, almost musical. "Please, sit down." "Tea?" "Sure. Thanks." Ben dropped into one of the chairs opposite the desk. It was extremely comfortable. The kind of comfortable that was probably designed to put visitors at ease, which meant it was a tactic, which meant Nizu was already working an angle. Ben liked him immediately. Nizu poured tea from a pot shaped like All Might's head, the number 1 hero's grinning face served as the lid, and slid a cup across the desk. "I've been watching your footage since yesterday afternoon. I've watched it 37 times, in fact. I've had my colleagues in the science department watch it. I've run it through every Quirk analysis database we have access to, which is all of them. And nothing matches." Nizu's smile widened. "Not the transformation, not the energy signature, not the physical characteristics of your altered form. You are, as far as our systems are concerned, impossible. I get that a lot. I imagine you do." Nizu sipped his tea, both paws wrapped around the tiny cup. "You told our security system that what you did was not a quirk. I'd very much like to hear what it is instead." Ben looked at Nizu. Then at Eraserhead, who had leaned against the wall by the door, arms crossed, watching with those tired, sharp eyes. Then back at Nizu. He could play this coy. Dole out information in pieces, keep leverage, maintain mystery. That was the smart play in most situations. But Ben had never been great at the smart play when a direct approach was faster, and something about Nizu's open, sharp-toothed grin told him that trying to outmaneuver a creature whose literal superpower was intelligence was a losing game. So he told the truth. He started from the beginning, the Omnitrix, azimuth, the basic concept of DNA transformation. He kept the broader universe stuff vague. Nizu didn't need a crash course in Vilgax's greatest hits, and focused on what was relevant, what the Omnitrix could do, how he'd ended up here, and what he knew about his situation. He laid it out clean and fast, no drama, no embellishment. Nizu listened without interrupting. His eyes never left Ben's face. When Ben finished, the office was quiet except for the distant sound of robots moving in the training grounds outside. "An alien device," Nizu said slowly, "that contains the DNA of over 1 million species, each with distinct biological capabilities, allowing you to physically transform into any of them at will. That's the short version, yeah. And you've been operating this device since you were 10 years old. Give or take. You are currently displaced from your home dimension with no confirmed method of return. The Omnitrix is working on it. Could be days, could be months, could be longer. Nizu set down his teacup. His expression hadn't changed, still that sharp, pleasant smile, but something behind his eyes had shifted. A calculation running at speeds that would make a supercomputer jealous. Eraserhead, Nizu said, without looking away from Ben. Your assessment. The woman by the door was quiet for a moment. He's telling the truth, or he's the best liar I've ever met. His body language is consistent, his story is internally coherent, and the footage doesn't match any known quirk factor. She paused. Also, I tried to erase his abilities the moment he walked in. My quirk didn't do anything. Whatever he's got, it's not quirk-based. Ben blinked. You tried to erase my powers. Standard precaution. Eraserhead's expression didn't change. Don't take it personally. Ha. Ben looked at her with new respect. What exactly does your power do? I can nullify the quirk of anyone I look at, as long as I maintain visual contact. And it didn't work on me because the Omnitrix isn't a quirk. It's external technology. That's my assumption. Ben filed that away. An ability that could shut down quirks on sight, that was a serious power. And this woman had been positioned between him and the door, ready to neutralize him if things went sideways. These people weren't naive. Good. So, Ben said, turning back to Nizu. Cards on the table. I'm stuck here. I don't have identification, I don't have resources, and based on what I've learned about your legal system, I committed a crime yesterday by using my abilities without a license. I didn't come here to beg. I came here because you run the best hero school in the country, and if anyone has the resources and the brainpower to help me figure out my situation, it's you. And what do you offer in return? Whatever you need. I've got access to technology and abilities this world has never seen. I've got years of combat experience against threats that would make your villain rankings look like a parking ticket list. And I've got a habit of showing up when things go wrong and making them go right. Ben leaned forward. I'm not interested in being your student, Nizu. I've graduated from that. But I think we can help each other. Nizu's smile was positively luminous. He looked like a kid who'd just been told Christmas was coming early. Mr. Tennyson, I've been running this school for 12 years. In that time, I have met exactly 0 individuals who walked through my door and made me genuinely uncertain about what they were capable of. Until today. He hopped off his chair, walked to the window, and looked out over the campus with his paws clasped behind his back. UA's entrance exam is in 10 months. It is the most significant annual event in the Japanese hero world, hundreds of applicants, observed by the Hero Commission, broadcast to industry professionals nationwide. A public demonstration of abilities that the entire country watches. You want me to take your entrance exam? I want you to demolish my entrance exam. Nizu turned back, eyes glittering. Publicly. Undeniably. In a way that makes the Hero Commission unable to ignore you, unable to quietly classify you as a threat, and unable to pretend you don't exist. I want you to walk into the most watched hero event in the country and show them something they've never seen before. Ben studied him. Why? Because the Hero Commission is a bureaucracy, Mr. Tennyson, and bureaucracies respond to spectacle. If you appear on their radar as an unregistered anomaly, they'll try to contain you. Study you. Possibly detain you. But if you appear as a phenomenon, someone the public has seen, someone the media is talking about, someone who just broke every record in UA's entrance exam, then you're not a problem to be managed. You're a resource to be courted. The dynamic shifts entirely in your favor. You've thought about this. I started thinking about it 11 seconds into our conversation. I've had 23 minutes to refine. Ben laughed. Actually laughed, the first real one since he'd woken up in that alley. You know what? I like you, Nizu. Most people do. It's the fur. Nizu hopped back into his chair. In the meantime, I'm offering you full access to UA's facilities. Housing in the campus dormitories, which are currently being prepared for next year's students. Access to our training grounds, our libraries, and our science department, which, I should mention, includes some of the finest minds in Japan. If a way home exists, they may be able to help you find it. And in exchange, I take your exam and put on a show. In exchange, you take the exam, you demonstrate your capabilities, and you allow me to position you within the hero world in a way that benefits both of us. Nizu's smile sharpened. I protect my interests, Mr. Tennyson, but I also protect my students. If what you've told me is true, and I believe it is, then you're potentially the most powerful individual in this country. I'd rather have you as an ally than an uncertainty. Ben considered it. The offer was good, better than good. Housing, resources, access to technology. And the entrance exam was 10 months away, which gave him time. Time to search for a way home, time to learn this world, time to figure out why the Omnitrix had been doing that weird pulsing thing since he arrived. And if he was being honest with himself, if he peeled back the practical considerations and looked at what was underneath, the idea of walking into an arena full of this world's best and brightest and showing them what a Tennyson could do. That sounded like fun. Deal, Ben said. He stuck out his hand. Nizu shook it. His paw was surprisingly warm. Excellent. Eraserhead will show you to the dormitories. And Mr. Tennyson? Nizu picked up his teacup. Welcome to UA. The dormitory was a building called Heights Alliance, a large, modern residential complex that was, at the moment, completely empty. It wouldn't be filled with students until the new term started, which meant Ben had the whole place to himself. He picked a room on the 4th floor with a good view of the campus, dropped onto the bed, and stared at the ceiling. He lasted about 45 seconds before the restlessness kicked in. The training grounds were calling. UA's facilities were world-class, Midoriya hadn't been exaggerating, and Ben wanted to see what the Omnitrix could do in this new dimension. The slow pulse hadn't stopped since his arrival, and his transformation into Big Chill had felt slightly different. Not weaker. If anything, the opposite. Like the Omnitrix was drawing on something in the ambient environment, an energy source that didn't exist back home. He found the outdoor training area, a sprawling complex of concrete arenas, obstacle courses, and reinforced buildings designed to be destroyed and rebuilt. A sign at the entrance read Ground Beta in bold letters. Nobody was around. Perfect. Ben cracked his neck, rolled his shoulders, and slapped the Omnitrix. Heat blast. The transformation surged through him, bone and muscle and skin rewriting, his body temperature spiking to levels that would vaporize a normal human. He emerged as a being of living magma, humanoid, his body a shell of volcanic rock over a core of white-hot flame. Fire danced across his shoulders and head like hair. He felt incredible. Not just good, incredible. Heat Blast's flame output back home was already enormous, but here, right now, it felt like someone had turned up the gain. He raised a hand, concentrated, and threw a fireball at an empty concrete building 30 yards away. The fireball hit like a cruise missile. The building didn't just catch fire, it detonated, the concrete flash heating and cracking, flames licking 20 feet into the air. Ben stared at the crater. That was a 4 out of 10, he said to himself. That should not have done that. He switched. Diamond Head, Petrosapien, living crystal. He felt the change immediately, the crystalline structure of his body resonating with a vibrational frequency he'd never felt before. He slammed his fist into the ground, and crystal erupted in a wave, spearing out from the impact point in jagged spires that were 50% larger than what he'd normally produce. XLR-8. His speed form, the Kinoceleron. He took off running and nearly blew past the training ground entirely, his velocity was measurably higher, the world blurring into streaks. He covered the length of ground beta in under a second and had to dig his clawed feet into the pavement to stop, leaving furrows in the concrete. The Omnitrix is boosted, Ben said, back in human form, staring at his wrist. The pulse was still there, but faster now, like an excited heartbeat. Something about this world is, you're feeding off the ambient Quirk energy, aren't you? The Omnitrix couldn't answer, not in words. But the faceplate flickered, and a diagnostic readout scrolled past that confirmed his suspicion. The metagenic energy suffusing this world's population, the engine that drove Quirks, was a passive environmental force, present in the atmosphere, the ground, the water. And the Omnitrix, designed to interface with the genetic potential of sapient species, was absorbing it like a sponge. His aliens weren't just functioning normally. They were enhanced. Azimuth would lose his mind, Ben muttered, grinning. He spent the next 3 hours cycling through forms, testing the boost, mapping the changes. Not every alien was equally enhanced, the effect seemed to scale with the alien's existing power level, amplifying what was already there rather than adding something new. But across the board, everything was sharper. Faster. Stronger. By the time he powered down for the last time, the sun was high overhead and ground beta looked like a war zone. Craters, crystal spires, scorch marks, ice patches from Big Chill, and a section of wall that had been cleanly punched through during his 4 arms test. I'm going to need to apologize for that, Ben said, surveying the damage. Yes, said a voice behind him. You are. Ben turned. Eraserhead was standing at the edge of the training ground, arms crossed, expression suggesting that her sleep had been interrupted again and she was going to take it personally. Hey, Ben said. So, the buildings here. They're designed to be destroyed, right? Designed to be destroyed during supervised training exercises. Not by unsupervised guests treating the facility like a personal playground. Fair point. Sorry about the wall. And the building. And actually, just generally sorry about all of it. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Eraserhead's face, so briefly Ben almost missed it. Nizu wants you to have this. She tossed him a phone, sleek, new, already activated. Your new contact. Nizu's number is preloaded, so is the school's administrative line. He's also arranged a stipend, nothing extravagant, but enough to cover food and basics. It'll be deposited weekly into an account he's set up under your name. He set up a bank account for me. It's been 2 hours. Nizu once restructured our entire curriculum over a lunch break because he was bored. A bank account is nothing. She turned to leave, then paused. The entrance exam format includes a practical component, robot villains that test compatibility. Nizu will brief you on the specifics closer to the date. In the meantime, try not to destroy any more buildings. She was gone before Ben could respond, disappearing into the campus with the silent efficiency of someone who turned avoidance of human interaction into an art form. Ben looked at the phone. It was already buzzing, a text from a number labeled Nizu, I see you've been productive. Wonderful. Ground beta is designed for heavy use, don't worry about the damage. The wall was due for replacement anyway. Grinning face with big eyes, a principal who used smiley faces. This dimension was something else. He typed back, thanks for the setup. I'll try to keep the property damage to a minimum. Nizu's response was instant, where's the fun in that? The months passed faster than Ben expected. He fell into a rhythm. Mornings were training, cycling through forms, testing limits, running combat scenarios against UA's robot drones. Nizu had given him access to the automated systems, and the robots were surprisingly challenging in large numbers. Afternoons were research. UA's science department had assigned him a liaison, a support course instructor named Power Loader, who was fascinated by the Omnitrix and eager to help analyze it without trying to take it apart. I can't take it off, Ben explained for the 3rd time, as Power Loader circled him with a scanner, the man's metal helmet tilting at curious angles. It's bonded to my DNA. Literally fused at the molecular level. The last person who tried to force it off triggered a self-destruct that would have vaporized everything in a 5-mile radius. Power Loader took a large step back. Good to know. But I can give you scan data. Energy signatures, transformation metrics, whatever the Omnitrix will allow externally. Just don't try to interface with it directly. It's got defense protocols that make your school's security look like a screen door. They found a working arrangement. Power Loader and his team took readings, ran analyses, and occasionally made excited noises about energy wavelengths that didn't appear in any existing physics model. The Omnitrix, for its part, continued to do its thing. The ambient Quirk energy was being processed continuously now, the device's internal systems integrating the new energy source with the smooth efficiency of technology designed by the smartest being in another universe. The return vector calculation crawled forward. Some days it jumped. Some days it stalled. Ben checked it every morning and every night, and tried not to think too hard about the number that never seemed to get close enough. In the evenings, he'd leave campus and meet Midoriya. The kid was training. Hard. Brutally hard, actually. Ben found out that Midoriya had been cleaning up a trash-strewn beach on the edge of the city, hauling refrigerators and car parts and industrial waste through pure physical effort, building a body that could survive the entrance exam. He was doing this alone, without a Quirk, on nothing but determination and protein bars. Who told you to do this? Ben asked, the first time he visited. Midoriya was waist-deep in garbage, trying to shift a washing machine that outweighed him by a factor of 3. It's my training plan. I wrote it myself. Based on, that's not what I asked. Who told you this was the path? Because you're going to take the entrance exam, and from what Nizu told me, the practical portion involves fighting robots. You're killing yourself to build basic muscle, and that's good, strength matters, but it's not going to be enough to punch through reinforced steel. Midoriya's arms dropped. The washing machine settled back into the sand. He looked at Ben with an expression that was part exhaustion, part defiance, and part desperate hope. I know, he said quietly. I know it's not enough. But I don't have anything else. Yeah, you do. You've got this. Ben tapped his own temple. Those notebooks aren't just a hobby, Midoriya. You've been analyzing quirks and combat styles for years. You understand how powers work better than most of the people who have them. That's a weapon. A real one. Analysis doesn't win fights. Sure it does. Every fight I've ever won started with knowing what I was up against. What it could do, what it couldn't, where the weaknesses were. He sat down on a rusted car hood. Tell me about the entrance exam robots. Everything you know. Midoriya blinked. Then the notebook came out, and the words came pouring after. He knew everything. The robot types, 1-pointers, 2-pointers, 3-pointers, and a massive 0-pointer designed as an obstacle rather than a target. Their construction, their movement patterns, their known weak points based on footage from previous exams that had leaked online. He'd mapped the likely arena layouts, estimated the point thresholds for passing, and profiled the quirk types that historically scored highest. You've basically written the cheat sheet, Ben said. Now use it. You don't need a quirk to take apart a robot, Midoriya. You need to know where to hit it, when to hit it, and what to hit it with. And if you can't hit hard enough on your own, I'll use the environment, Midoriya said, and his eyes were doing that thing, the rapid-fire calculation look, connections firing. Debris. Structural weak points. If I can get a robot off balance, gravity does the work. The 2-pointers have exposed hydraulic lines on their rear leg joints. If those are severed, they topple. A piece of rebar, a sharp edge, anything with leverage, now you're thinking. From that point on, Ben helped Midoriya train. Not with the Omnitrix, that wasn't what the kid needed. What he needed was someone who'd fought 1,000 different enemies and survived not because he was the strongest, but because he was clever. Ben taught him what Grandpa Max had taught him, what years of field experience had drilled into his bones: awareness, positioning, timing. How to read a battlefield. How to turn an enemy's size against them. How to be small and fast and smart when you couldn't be big and powerful. Midoriya absorbed it like a sponge. The kid's capacity for learning was staggering. Show him something once and he'd have it catalogued, contextualized, and adapted to 3 different scenarios by the next day. His body was getting stronger from the beach cleanup, but his mind was getting sharper, and that was the real weapon. One evening, about 3 months in, they were sitting on the newly cleared beach watching the sunset. The sand was still dirty, but you could see it now, actual sand, stretching to the waterline. Midoriya had cleared almost a third of the beach by himself. "Ben," Midoriya said. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Shoot." "Do you miss your home?" Ben was quiet for a moment. The Omnitrix hummed softly on his wrist. Out on the water, a boat with someone who had glowing antennae was pulling into the harbor. "Yeah," he said. "Every day. I miss my cousin Gwen. She's probably tearing the multiverse apart looking for me. I miss my partner Rook. I miss my grandpa." He paused. "I miss smoothies. This world has great food, but nobody's figured out the smoothie thing yet. It's a tragedy." Midoriya laughed softly. "I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm not sitting around moping about it. The Omnitrix is working on the return vector. Nizu's science team is running parallel calculations. Either they'll find a way to send me home, or Gwen will find a way to pull me back. In the meantime, I'm exactly where I need to be. Helping me. Helping you. Helping whoever else needs it." He glanced at Midoriya. "I stopped a mugging on Tuesday, by the way. 2 guys cornered a lady in an alley near the train station. I went wildmutt and chased them 6 blocks. Wildmutt? Vulpamancer. No eyes, all teeth, about the size of a large dog. Tracks by smell and vibration. Not great for conversation, fantastic for making criminals soil themselves." Midoriya was writing in his notebook again. "Of course he was. And the Hero Commission hasn't contacted you about unlicensed Quirk use? They don't know it's me. Different alien each time. No consistent description for them to track." He grinned. "The forums are calling me an unidentified multi-quirk vigilante. One thread thinks I'm a secret government project. You're enjoying this?" "Little bit." Midoriya shook his head, smiling, and kept writing. The months kept turning. Ben trained, explored the city, built a life in the spaces between searching for a way home. He got to know Muzutafu's geography, the shopping districts, the quiet residential streets, the industrial zones where villains like to operate under cover of noise and grime. He stopped crimes when he found them, quickly and decisively, never staying long enough to be identified. The Omnitrix gave him infinite variety. No 2 interventions looked the same, and the growing urban legend of a shape-shifting vigilante became a low buzz on hero forums without ever coalescing into a real lead for the authorities. He met All Might by accident. 6 months in, on a Tuesday afternoon, Ben was walking through a commercial district when a building exploded. Not metaphorically, the front wall of a 6-story office building blew outward in a shower of concrete and glass, and a figure the size of a truck came flying through the gap, wreathed in fire and roaring. The villain was big, 15 feet tall, skin like volcanic rock, hands that dripped actual magma. Some kind of geological mutation quirk, dialed up to 11. He was rampaging down the street, flipping cars, melting signposts, screaming something about being disrespected. Heroes were responding. Ben could see 3 of them converging, but they were cautious, keeping distance, and the villain was moving fast toward a crowded intersection. Ben was about to slap the Omnitrix when the air changed. It was like a pressure shift, a sudden, physical sense of weight descending on the street. The civilians felt it too, heads turning, eyes going up. And then a shape dropped from the sky like a meteor, landing between the villain and the intersection with an impact that cracked the pavement in a 10-foot radius. All Might. He was enormous. Not just tall, his presence was enormous, filling the street the way a bonfire fills a dark room. Blonde hair swept back in two horn-like peaks. A smile so wide and confident it bordered on architectural. A body that looked like it had been sculpted by someone who'd never seen a human but had heard they were supposed to be impressive. Fear not. The voice hit Ben like a physical force, warm and absolute. Why? Because I am here. The villain charged. All Might met the charge with a single punch. The shockwave flattened everything in a 60-foot cone behind the villain, car alarms triggered, windows shattered, a fire hydrant burst and sent a geyser of water 30 feet into the air. The villain went from full sprint to unconscious in the space between one heartbeat and the next, his massive body launching backward and cratering into the already damaged building. One punch. The whole thing lasted maybe 4 seconds. The crowd erupted. Cheering, screaming, chanting his name. All Might stood in the middle of the street, cape settling, that impossible grin locked in place, and raised a fist to the sky. The cheering doubled. Ben watched from across the street, leaning against a lamppost, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Recognition. Not of All Might specifically, he'd never seen the man before today. But he recognized what All Might was. The symbol. The pillar. The person who showed up and, by showing up, made everything okay. Ben had played that role himself, in his own world. He knew the weight of it, the cost of it, and the impossible, addictive high of being the reason people stopped being afraid. He also noticed something else. As the crowd surged forward and the other heroes moved in to secure the villain, All Might turned away, just for a moment, half hidden behind a column of smoke from the burning building. And in that moment, his smile flickered. Not much. A micro-expression, there and gone, like a light bulb browning out before snapping back to full brightness. And his hand pressed against his left side, just below the ribs, in a gesture that spoke of pain. Then the smile was back, full wattage, and he was wading into the crowd, high-fiving civilians, posing for photos, being All Might. But Ben had seen it. He'd learned to read people in situations where a misread got you killed, and he'd seen the flicker. All Might was hurt. Not from the fight had been nothing. This was something older. Something he was carrying. Ben filed it away and kept walking. He didn't meet All Might that day. But All Might noticed him. The report came through Nizu's channels a week later. The #1 hero has inquired about you, Nizu told Ben over tea in his office, clearly delighted. Not officially, through private channels. He saw you at the scene of the volcanic villain incident and recognized you from the sludge villain footage. How? I was in human form. The footage from the sludge incident shows Big Chill, not me. All Might is many things, Mr. Tennyson, and one of them is observant. He noticed the Omnitrix on your wrist. Apparently, distinctive green and black wristwatch was mentioned in the initial police report from the sludge incident, and All Might has a very good memory. So what does he want? To meet you. Quietly, off the record. He's concerned. A powerful unknown operating in his city tends to make the symbol of peace nervous. Tell him I'm available whenever he is. I don't hide. The meeting happened 2 days later, in Nizu's office, after hours. All Might arrived looking nothing like the Titan Ben had seen punch a villain into orbit. He was thin, almost skeletal, hollow-cheeked, with sunken eyes and blonde hair that hung limp around a gaunt face. He wore a white t-shirt that hung off him like a sail, and when he sat down, he moved like a man 3 times his age. Ben stared. He couldn't help it. Not what you expected, All Might said, and his voice was different too, quieter, rougher, without the booming projection. He smiled, and this time it was real, tired and wry and human. This is my true form. The muscular version is, Well, it's a long story. I'm good with long stories. I've got one of my own. They talked. All Might explained enough for Ben to understand, a catastrophic injury, years ago, that had left him diminished. He could still access his full power, but only for a limited time each day, and that time was shrinking. The symbol of peace was running on fumes, and the world didn't know. Ben told his story in return. The Omnitrix, the displacement, the deal with Nizu. All Might listened with the attentive stillness of someone who'd heard a lot of extraordinary things and retained the capacity to be surprised. You froze that sludge villain in seconds, All Might said. The same villain I had failed to contain earlier that day. Ben's eyebrows went up. That thing was yours? All Might's gaunt face tightened with something that looked like guilt. I captured it. It escaped from the bottle I'd stored it in. I was in my weakened form, and I was delayed, and by the time I arrived at the scene, you'd already handled it. He paused. The boy who was trapped. Bakugo. I failed him. You didn't fail anyone. You can't be everywhere. The symbol of peace is supposed to be everywhere. That's the point. That's an impossible standard, and you know it. All Might looked at him. Really looked, the way Ben had looked at the flicker in his smile a week ago. You sound like you're speaking from experience. I've been the guy everyone counts on. The one who shows up and fixes everything. It's the best feeling in the world when it works. And when it doesn't, Ben shrugged. When it doesn't, you pick yourself up and do better next time. You don't sit around torturing yourself about the times you were too slow. That's a luxury heroes can't afford. All Might was quiet for a long time. The office was dim, the campus dark outside the windows, and in the silence, two men who carried impossible weights sat with the rare comfort of being understood. Nizu tells me you're taking the entrance exam, All Might said eventually. That's the plan. I'll be there. I'm teaching this year, my first year on staff. I joined because, he hesitated. Because I'm looking for a successor. Someone to carry on my legacy when I can't anymore. Ben heard what he wasn't saying. Midoriya. All Might's eyes widened. You know, I've been training with him for months. The kid's incredible, All Might. He's got no powers and he's still out there every single day, pushing himself to the breaking point, because he refuses to give up on his dream. If you're looking for someone with the right heart, it's him. I guarantee it. Something shifted in All Might's expression. The guilt was still there, but underneath it, blooming like a plant breaking through concrete, hope. I encountered him, All Might said. The day of the sludge villain. He was the one who ran toward the monster, before you intervened. A quirkless boy, running toward a villain that professional heroes couldn't handle. He shook his head. I told him he couldn't be a hero without a quirk. Ben went still. You what? I was wrong. All Might said it immediately, no hedging. I was in my weakened form, I was frustrated, I was afraid, and I said something I had no right to say. I've been trying to find him since, to make it right. I can arrange that. Ben said it carefully, keeping the edge out of his voice. He understood, he did. All Might was a man crushed under the weight of his own mythology, watching his power drain away, terrified of what happened when the symbol crumbled. Telling a quirkless kid to give up wasn't cruelty. It was projection. It was a man who felt his own inadequacy telling someone else what he was afraid was true about himself. Understanding it didn't make it okay. But it made it fixable. I'll talk to Midoriya, Ben said. You should meet him. Properly, this time. And maybe don't lead with the, you can't be a hero, thing. All Might actually laughed, a short, surprised sound, like he'd forgotten he could. You're quite something, Tennyson. I've been told. They shook hands. All Might's grip was firm even in his diminished form, and his eyes held a spark that Ben suspected had been dimming for a long time. The meeting with Midoriya happened a week later, and Ben wasn't there for it. It wasn't his moment to intrude on. But he heard about it afterward, from a Midoriya who was so overwhelmed he could barely speak coherently. All Might had told him the truth, about One for All, the transferable quirk, the legacy. He'd offered it to Midoriya. He said I was worthy, Midoriya whispered, sitting on the beach at sunset, staring at his hands. He said he'd been looking for someone, and he saw me run toward the sludge villain, and he knew. He was right. Ben, he's giving me his power. All Might's power. The strongest quirk in the world, and he's giving it to me because I ran toward a monster. Tears were streaming down his face, and he wasn't wiping them away. All this time, everyone said I couldn't. My classmates, my teachers, Kaken. They all said quirkless people can't be heroes. And now you're going to prove every single one of them wrong. Ben put a hand on his shoulder. You earned this, Midoriya. Not because of what All Might saw that day. Because of every day before it. Every notebook. Every hour of training. Every time you got knocked down and stood up. That's what All Might saw. He just needed to see it in person to believe it. Midoriya cried for a while. Ben let him. Some moments needed space. The remaining months were intense. Midoriya's training shifted, he was preparing his body to receive One for All now, with All Might guiding him through a brutal physical regimen on top of the beach cleanup. Ben saw less of him, but when they met, the changes were visible. Midoriya was stronger, more confident, standing a little straighter. Ben's own preparations were simpler. He didn't need to get stronger, the Omnitrix, boosted by this world's ambient energy, had him operating at levels that exceeded anything he'd benchmarked back home. What he needed was information. He studied the entrance exam's format, its rules, its scoring system. He mapped the arena. He chose his aliens. The night before the exam, he sat in his dormitory room, the Omnitrix's faceplate casting green light across the ceiling, and ran through his lineup one more time. The phone on his nightstand buzzed. A text from Midoriya, I'm so nervous I might throw up. Is that normal? Ben typed back, totally normal. I threw up before my first big fight. Granted, I was 10 and I'd eaten 3 bags of candy corn, but the principle stands. That's disgusting. It was. Aim for the robots, not the other applicants, and you'll be fine. Thank you, Ben. For everything. He stared at the message for a moment. Thought about Gwen, about Grandpa Max, about everyone back home who'd believed in him when he was the scared kid with the alien watch. Then he typed, go be a hero, Midoriya. And set the phone down. Morning came. Exam day. The crowd outside UA's gates was enormous, hundreds of teenagers, buzzing with nervous energy, flexing quirks and comparing stats and trying not to look as terrified as they felt. Ben moved through them like a stone in a river, undisturbed by the current. He spotted Midoriya near the entrance, green-faced and trembling, and gave him a nod. Midoriya nodded back, swallowed hard, and squared his shoulders. A girl was talking to Midoriya, round face, brown hair, cheerful energy. She'd caught him when he tripped on the walkway, and Midoriya was doing that thing where his brain went offline around people who were nice to him. Ben smiled and kept moving. The auditorium was packed. Present Mike, a hero with a voice amplification quirk and the fashion sense of a rock star, ran through the rules at a volume that rattled fillings. Practical exam, robot villains in a simulated urban environment. 1-pointers, 2-pointers, 3-pointers, and the 0-pointer, a massive obstacle meant to be avoided. Points were scored by destroying robots. Highest scores got in. Simple enough. A kid in the audience, tall, rigid, blue hair, glasses, hand chopping the air when he spoke, stood up and demanded an explanation for the 0-pointer's purpose. Then he turned and pointed at Midoriya, publicly calling him out for muttering, accusing him of being a distraction. Midoriya shrank in his seat. Ben, sitting 3 rows back, made a mental note to put extra effort into the exam. Not because he needed to. Because this world had a problem with people who decided, on sight, who did and didn't belong. And he'd always enjoyed proving those people wrong. The examinees were split into groups and assigned to different battle arenas. Ben was in Battle Center B, Mid-Area was in a different center, intentional, probably, to prevent students from the same middle school from cooperating. Battle Center B was a full-scale mock city. Streets, buildings, intersections, even a park with a fountain. It was enormous. The other examinees in Ben's group were clustered at the starting gate, stretching, psyching themselves up, eyeing each other with competitive wariness. Ben stood at the back, hands in his pockets, watching the massive gates with a calm that several other examinees found unnerving. "Hey," said a guy next to him, muscular, spiky red hair, a grin full of teeth that were literally sharp. "You're pretty chill, man. Not nervous?" "Not really. I'm Kirishima. Eijiro Kirishima. What's your quirk?" Ben smiled. "You'll see." A horn blared. The gates flew open. Present Mick's voice boomed from speakers, "What are you waiting for? There's no countdown in a real fight. Go go go." The crowd surged forward. Ben walked. He let the mob pour into the city ahead of him, a stampede of quirks and adrenaline, spreading out through the streets. He could hear robots activating, mechanical roars, the thud of heavy footsteps, the crash of the first engagements. When the crowd had thinned, Ben raised his left hand and activated the Omnitrix. He'd thought about this. Nizu wanted a spectacle, something the cameras would capture, something that would make the Hero Commission take notice, something undeniable. He'd considered going big. Way big, 100-foot alien that could end the exam in a single step. But that was a hammer, and this called for a scalpel. He chose XLR-8. The transformation hit like a shot of lightning. His body compressed, streamlined, legs restructuring into powerful digitigrade limbs built for impossible speed. A tail for balance. A visor that snapped down over his eyes, polarizing against the wind resistance. Blue and black, sleek as a missile. He took one step. Then he was gone. The examinees in Battle Center B never saw what hit them. Not because Ben was attacking them, he wasn't. But from their perspective, robots were simply exploding. One moment, a three-pointer would be bearing down on someone, massive and menacing, and the next it was in pieces, components scattered across the pavement, severed cleanly at every joint. The students would spin, looking for the source, and see nothing but a blue streak already 3 blocks away. Ben moved through the city like a hurricane with a plan. XLR-8 speed, boosted by the ambient quirk energy, was operating at a level that made the world around him seem frozen. He could see every robot in his path, their joint configurations, their power sources, their weak points. He'd studied Midoriya's notes. He knew exactly where to strike. Three-pointer at the intersection, dismantled in 2 passes, legs severed, power core extracted and tossed aside. Cluster of one-pointers on Main Street, shattered in a single run, his clawed hands punching through their chassis like paper. Two-pointer ambushing a student from behind, he intercepted it mid-swing, redirected its arm into its own body, and was past before the student even registered the danger. 30 seconds in, he had 45 points. He shifted. The Omnitrix flashed, and XLR-8 was gone, replaced by Diamond Head, 7 feet of living crystal, refracting the sunlight into prismatic bursts. He landed in the middle of a street where 4 three-pointers were converging on a group of overwhelmed students, and the pavement erupted. Crystal spires shot from the ground in a wave, impaling the robots from below, lifting them off their feet, and holding them suspended 20 feet in the air like insects pinned to a board. The students stared. Ben turned, one arm already reshaping into a blade, and carved through a two-pointer that had been flanking from a side street. 63 points. 90 seconds. He shifted again. 4 arms, massive, red, four-armed Tetraman muscle. He grabbed a three-pointer by the leg, swung it like a bat into two more, and threw the wreckage down the street hard enough to bowl over 4 one-pointers like dominoes. 79 points. 2 minutes. In the observation room, Nizu sipped his tea. The room was full of UA's faculty, teachers, administrators, support staff, all watching screens that showed every battle center simultaneously. The atmosphere was professional but electric. This was the event they prepared for all year, the crucible that selected the next generation of heroes. Most of the screens showed expected patterns. Talented kids doing talented things. Strong quirks deployed with varying degrees of skill. A few standouts: a blonde boy in Battle Center A was generating enormous explosions, tearing through robots with a ferocity that bordered on fury. A girl in Battle Center C was making robots float and then dropping them from lethal heights. A boy in Battle Center D was generating ice on a scale that was freezing entire streets. But everyone in the room was watching Battle Center B. "What am I looking at?" said Midnight, leaning forward in her chair. On the screen, a massive red four-armed creature was using a three-pointer as a projectile weapon. Then it flashed green and became a crystalline humanoid that was turning the street into a forest of razor-sharp crystal spires. Then it flashed again and became a blur of blue speed that was dismantling robots faster than the cameras could track. "That," said Nizu, "is Ben Tennyson. The anomaly from the sludge villain incident?" Snipe asked. "The same. He's been on campus for several months as my guest. He's taking the exam today as a formal demonstration of his capabilities." Nizu's smile was razor-sharp. "I did warn the Hero Commission that this year's exam would be unusual." On the screen, Ben, now a hulking green dinosaur-like creature that the readout identified as nothing in any database, punched clean through a three-pointer's chest, lifted the wreck overhead, and threw it into two more. "He's at 96 points, Ectoplasm reported, checking the scoring system. "In 3 minutes. "That's not possible," said the blue-jeaned man at the back of the room. "Vlad King. The current record for the practical exam is 77 points in the full 10 minutes. "Set by me," All Might said quietly. He was in his muscular form, arms crossed, watching the screen with an expression that mixed pride and something deeper. "When I took the exam. 30 years ago." "He's going to triple it," Midnight said. "Yes," Nizu agreed. "He is." The alarm sounded at the 6-minute mark. Zero-pointer deployment. The ground shook. Buildings trembled. And from behind a row of high-rises at the far end of Battle Center B, something rose, a robot the size of a building, a mechanical titan with a single glowing eye and fists like wrecking balls, designed to be so overwhelming that the only rational response was to run. The examinees ran. Scrambling, panicking, some using their quirks for speed, all of them streaming away from the zero-pointer as it advanced, crushing parked cars and clipping buildings, its shadow swallowing the street. Ben stood in the intersection and looked up at it. In his chest, that old familiar feeling, the quiet, settled certainty that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The zero-pointer's fist came down. Ben went way big. The transformation was different this time. Not just bigger, the Omnitrix blazed with light so intense that the cameras whited out for a full second. When the image resolved, the zero-pointer's fist had been caught by a hand. A hand attached to an arm. An arm attached to a body that was rising and rising and rising. Way Big stood 120 feet tall. Red and gray, vaguely humanoid, with a crest that rose from his head like a blade. His fingers were wrapped around the zero-pointer's fist, and the robot, the massive, building-sized, unstoppable zero-pointer, looked small. "Ah," Ben said, and his voice rolled across the arena like thunder. "You're cute." He pushed. The zero-pointer slid backward, its treads gouging trenches in the pavement, and then Ben shifted his grip, grabbed the robot by its arm, and threw it. The zero-pointer sailed over the arena walls, over the campus, and came down in a distant empty lot with a crash that registered on seismographs across the prefecture. Dust mushroomed into the sky. Car alarms went off for a half-mile radius. Ben powered down, shrinking back to human form in the middle of the street. The dust settled. The arena was silent. Hundreds of examinees stood frozen, staring at the spot where he'd been 120 feet tall. "Huh," said Kirishima, from somewhere in the crowd. "That's a pretty good quirk." In the observation room, nobody spoke for 11 seconds. Then Midnight said, very quietly, "What the hell?" Nizu sipped his tea. The exam ended. The points were tallied. Ben's final score in the practical was 231 villain points, more than triple the all-time record, achieved in roughly half the allotted time, using 5 different transformations that bore no resemblance to any known quirk. There were also rescue points, a separate, secret scoring metric that awarded points for helping fellow examinees. Ben had earned 42 of those, primarily from the moments he'd intercepted robots that were about to hit other students. He hadn't been trying to score rescue points. He'd just done it because people were in danger and he was right there. Total score, 273. The second highest score was Katsuki Bakugo, in Battle Center A, with 77 villain points and 0 rescue points. "He broke the system," Power Loader said flatly, staring at the scoreboard. "He didn't break it," Nizu said, hopping off his chair and adjusting his tie. "He simply demonstrated that our system was designed for a level of capability that he exceeds." "There's a difference." "Is there?" "Philosophically?" "Absolutely." Nizu straightened his cuffs. "Now then. I have a call to make to the Hero Commission. This should be tremendous fun." Outside, in the fading afternoon light, Ben walked out of the arena gates and found Midoriya sitting on a bench, staring at his right hand. The hand was swollen, fingers purple and bent at wrong angles, clearly broken in multiple places. "What happened?" Ben asked, sitting next to him. "I used one for all." Midoriya's voice was shaky but bright, lit with a wonder that outshone the pain. "I punched the 0-pointer. In my battle center. It was about to crush someone, a girl, the nice girl who caught me earlier, and my legs moved, and I jumped, and I punched it, and it broke your arm. I can't control it yet. All Might said it would take time, but in the moment, I used everything. 100%. And it broke me, but it stopped the robot, and she was safe, and," his eyes were brimming. "I was a hero, Ben. For 1 minute, I was a hero." "You've always been a hero, Midoriya." Ben flagged down a medic. He'd spotted the old woman in the nurse's outfit making rounds, healing injured examinees with a kiss. "But maybe let's get that hand looked at before it falls off." Recovery Girl, the medic, took one look at Midoriya's hand, sighed the sigh of someone who had seen too many enthusiastic teenagers, and got to work. Ben watched Midoriya's bones reset and knit themselves back together and filed the healing quirk away in his mental catalog of things that were both amazing and deeply weird about this world. "You did something today," Midoriya said, as they walked toward the train station. His hand was healed but sore, and he was cradling it against his chest. "In the exam. Everyone's talking about it. Someone said you threw the 0-pointer over the wall." "I did. As a giant. Way big. To Custer, cosmic storm entity. About 120 feet, give or take." Midoriya's mouth worked soundlessly. "Then, I need a bigger notebook." Ben laughed all the way to the station. The results came a week later. Midoriya passed, barely, scraping in with rescue points that pushed him over the threshold, but he passed. He called Ben at 11 p.m., sobbing so hard he was unintelligible for the first 30 seconds, and Ben sat on his dormitory bed and grinned at the ceiling and let the kid cry it out. "You did it," Ben said, when the sobs subsided. "We did it. You trained me, you believed in me, I pointed you in the right direction. You ran there on your own. Ben, save the speeches for graduation, Midoriya. You've got 3 years of hero school ahead of you. The hard part starts now. A shaky laugh. You sound like All Might. I'll take that as a compliment. They talked for another hour. When Midoriya finally hung up, exhausted and elated, Ben sat in the quiet of his room and looked at the Omnitrix. The return vector calculation had updated that morning, 12%. Still climbing. Still slow. He thought about Gwen. About Grandpa Max. About Bellwood and the smoothie shop and his stupid, beautiful, chaotic life in a universe that felt further away every day. Then he thought about Midoriya's sobbing, joyful voice, and the girl who'd been saved from the zero-pointer, and the look on All Might's face when they talked about finding a successor. He thought about the look in Shigaraki's eyes on that bar footage Nizu had shown him, footage from surveillance cameras the principal had access to through channels he didn't explain. The villain's twitching fingers. The calculating hatred. Something was coming. Ben could feel it the way you feel a storm before the clouds arrive, a change in pressure, a heaviness in the air. The League of Villains was out there, and they knew about him, and whatever they were planning had been adjusted to account for his existence. Good. Let them plan. Let them adjust. Ben Tennyson had been fighting people who planned for him since he was a child, and the one thing they all had in common was that they underestimated him. Every single time. He lay back on his bed, one arm behind his head, the Omnitrix glowing softly in the dark. All right, new world, he said to no one. Let's see what you've got. 3 weeks later, on the first day of the new term at UA High School, the students of Class 1A filed into their homeroom and found 2 surprises waiting for them. The first was their homeroom teacher, Eraserhead, lying in a sleeping bag behind the podium, looking like she'd rather be literally anywhere else. The second was the young man sitting at the back of the classroom, feet up on the desk, green jacket, brown hair, a strange device on his wrist glowing faintly green, watching them with an easy grin that suggested he knew something they didn't. Before you ask, Eraserhead said, unzipping the sleeping bag enough to glare at the class, yes, he's supposed to be here. No, he's not a student. Nizu will explain. Eventually. Probably. Don't touch his watch. 20 students stared at Ben. Ben raised a hand. Hey. I'm Ben. This is gonna be fun. Bakugo, in the front row, looked like he was about to explode. Literally. It was going to be a great year. Chapter 3, Unforeseen Simulation Joint. The bus smelled like teenagers and industrial cleaner, which was about what Ben expected from a vehicle that regularly transported 20 hormone-charged superpowered adolescents. He sat in the back row, one leg crossed over the other, watching Class 1A settle into their seats with the chaotic energy of a school trip that promised violence. 2 weeks into the term, and he was still figuring out the dynamics. Eraserhead, Aizawa Shota, as Ben had learned her actual name was, had spent the first day running the class through a Quirk assessment test. 50-meter dash, grip strength, standing long jump, repeated side steps, ball throw, sit-ups, seated toe touch, distance run. Basic physical benchmarks, enhanced by Quirk use. The student who ranked last, she'd announced with the flat effect of someone ordering coffee, would be expelled. She'd exempted Ben from the assessment. Not because he couldn't do it, because, as she'd put it with characteristic bluntness, if you participate, the results become meaningless for everyone else. You're here to observe, not to destroy the grading curve. So he'd observed. And what he'd observed was a class of genuinely remarkable kids. Todoroki Shoto had frozen the ball to absolute zero during the ball throw and launched it with a thermal differential that sent it into low orbit. Or close enough. The kid had staggering power, ice generation from his right side, and a fire ability on his left that he refused to use, which was a story Ben intended to learn eventually. Todoroki moved through the assessment with mechanical precision and zero visible emotion, which told Ben more about his home life than any file could. Bakugo Katsuki, the blonde kid from the sludge villain incident, the one Ben had pulled out of a monster's gullet, performed with a fury that bordered on desperation. Every test was a war. Every result had to be the best, and when it wasn't, the explosions from his palms got louder. He'd recognized Ben on the first day, and the look in his crimson eyes had been complicated: rage, humiliation, something that might have been grudging acknowledgement, and then more rage to cover it up. He hadn't spoken to Ben. He hadn't needed to. The explosion said plenty. Midoriya had come in last on the assessment. Aizawa had threatened expulsion. Ben had watched the terror bloom on the kid's face and felt his hand drift toward the Omnitrix, not to intervene, but out of protective instinct. Then Aizawa had revealed it was a logical ruse, a motivation tactic, and Ben had added diabolical teaching methods to the growing list of things he respected about the woman. Now, 2 weeks later, they were on a bus heading to an off-campus training facility for their first rescue exercise. All Might was supposed to be teaching it, but a last-minute change had swapped him for 13, a space-themed hero whose quirk could generate black holes. Rescue scenarios, not combat. That was the official agenda. Ben didn't trust official agendas. He never had. Tennyson. Aizawa's voice, low enough that only he could hear, from the seat across the aisle. She hadn't looked up from the papers she was grading. You've been tense since we left campus. Just a feeling. Elaborate. Ben watched the city slide past the bus windows. This facility we're going to. The USJ. It's off campus, isolated, with limited access points. We're bringing 20 students with minimal combat experience, one teacher with a utility quirk better suited for rescue than fighting, and you. And you. And me. But nobody outside UA knows I'll be here. What they know is that Class 1A, the class that includes the kid who inherited All Might's power, not that anyone's supposed to know that, is heading to a remote facility with a skeleton crew of teachers. He paused. If I were planning something, this is the scenario I'd want. Aizawa's pen stopped moving. She still didn't look at him, but her posture had shifted, the lazy slouch tightening into something alert. You think we're walking into an attack? I think if we're not, I'll be happy to be wrong. But I'd rather be ready and wrong than relaxed and dead. She was quiet for a moment. Then, very deliberately, she reached up and loosened the capture weapon coiled around her neck, the specialized scarf that served as her primary combat tool. I'll keep my eyes open. That's all I'm asking. The bus pulled up to the USJ, and it was, Ben had to admit, impressive. The building was a massive dome, like a stadium, and inside it contained multiple disaster simulation zones, a flood zone, a fire zone, a landslide zone, a mountain zone, a ruins zone, each one a self-contained environment designed for rescue training. The scale was enormous, the engineering was clever, and the whole thing was exactly as isolated and vulnerable as Ben had feared. 13 met them at the entrance, gave a speech about using quirks for rescue, and began walking the class through the facility overview. The students were wide-eyed, excited, chattering. Midoriya was muttering at approximately 300 words per minute about the engineering of the flood zone. The round-faced girl, Uraraka, Ben had learned, was bouncing on her toes. Even Todoroki's expression had thawed from frozen to mildly interested. Ben hung back, near the entrance, and watched the central plaza below them. The air changed. It started as a shimmer, a distortion in the space at the center of the plaza, like heat haze, but darker. Then it tore open, a swirling vortex of black and purple mist, and figures began stepping through. 1. 5. 10. 20. 50. More. They poured out of the portal like ants from a kicked mound, villains, dozens of them, armed and quirked and moving with the organized purpose of people who'd been briefed. They fanned out through the central plaza, taking positions, covering angles, and at the center of the group, 2 figures stood out. Kurojiiri, the mist villain, the one who'd created the portal. His body was made of dark purple fog, with 2 glowing yellow eyes floating in the void where a face should have been. He was the logistics. The transport. And Shigaraki Tamura. Ben recognized him from the surveillance footage Nizu had shown him. Pale, thin, hunched, a severed hand pressed to his face like a mask. His exposed skin was dry and cracked, his posture that of someone perpetually on the edge of scratching an itch that would never go away. He moved with the jittery energy of a man held together by hatred and habit. Behind them, standing motionless at the back of the villain crowd, was something else. It was massive. Humanoid, but wrong, a body of exposed muscle and dark skin, a brain visible through the transparent dome of its skull, eyes that were empty and fixed. It stood 8 feet tall, and even from this distance, Ben could feel the raw power radiating off it like heat from a furnace. The Nomu. 13, get the students out, Aizawa said, and her voice was ice. The capture weapon uncoiled from her neck, snaking into her hands. Her eyes were open wide, Quirk active, ready to erase. Aizawa-sensei, you can't fight them alone. Midoriya's voice, high and panicked. She won't be alone, Ben said. He stepped forward, past Aizawa, past the students, to the railing overlooking the central plaza. Below, Shigaraki had tilted his head up, and through the fingers of the hand on his face, those red eyes found Ben. Recognition. Immediate and electric. Oh, Shigaraki said, and his voice carried in the dome's acoustics, amplified by the vast space. Oh, it's you. The thing from the sludge villain. The one that's not a quirk. His head tilted further, a bird-like gesture that made Ben's skin crawl. We came for All Might, but you're a bonus. Sorry to disappoint on the All Might front, Ben called down. But I'm pretty good at consolation prizes. Tennyson. Aizawa, beside him, voice tight. The priority is the students. I know. He didn't look away from Shigaraki. Get them out. I'll handle the welcoming committee. There are at least 70 villains down there. I can count. And that thing, she nodded toward the Nomu. I don't know what it is, but it's not normal. My quirk won't work on something with a mutation-type ability, and that thing looks like a weapon. Purpose-built. Ben's eyes narrowed. Designed to fight All Might, based on what I'm guessing. Shock absorption, maybe regeneration. Something to tank hits from the strongest person they know about. And you're just going to, Aizawa. He turned to her, and she saw something in his expression that made her stop. Not arrogance. Not bravado. Just the settled, absolute certainty of someone who had walked into worse than this and walked out again. I've got this. Protect the kids. She held his gaze for 1 second. 2. Then she nodded, once, sharp, and turned to the class. Everyone, move to the exit. Now. 13, lead them out. If the mist villain tries to cut off the escape route, hit him with black hole, he has a physical body in there somewhere, and it's vulnerable to suction. What about Tennyson-san? Uraraka asked, her brown eyes wide with fear. Watch, Aizawa said, and there was something in her voice that might have been confidence. And learn. The mist swirled. Kurogiri was faster than they'd expected, the purple fog billowed up from the plaza, expanding, racing toward the entrance where the students were clustered. He materialized between them and the exit, his foggy body spreading like a curtain, yellow eyes gleaming. I'm afraid I can't allow that, Kurogiri said, his voice smooth and cultured. You are Class 1A of UA High School, and the League of Villains has business with you today. If you'll cooperate, this can be. Ben moved. He didn't go for an alien. Not yet. He crossed the 15 feet between himself and Kurogiri at a dead sprint and drove his shoulder into the mist villain's body. Kurogiri was intangible in his fog form, but Ben had fought intangible enemies before. There was always a core, a solid center, and his instinct found it. His shoulder connected with something hard inside the mist, and Kurogiri staggered, the fog flickering, a metal collar becoming visible for just an instant at what would be his neck. There you are, Ben said, and slapped the Omnitrix. Green flash. His body reconfigured, smaller this time, denser. Gray skin, a massive cranium, eyes that glowed with an intelligence that could process 1,000 variables simultaneously. Gray matter, Galvan form, 5 inches tall, the smartest species in his universe. No. Not gray matter. Not for this. He slapped the dial again before the transformation fully settled, overriding the selection. The faceplate spun. He found what he wanted. Chromastone. The crystal entity erupted from the green light, 7 feet tall, a body of living ultraviolet crystal, one eye blazing with absorbed energy. Chromastone could absorb any form of energy and redirect it, and right now, Kurogyri's warp gates were energy constructs. Kurogyri hurled a warp gate at the students, a black vortex that would scatter them across the facility, isolate them among the villain groups waiting in each zone. Chromastone stepped into its path, raised one hand, and absorbed it. The warp gate collapsed into his palm like water into a drain. Kurogyri's yellow eyes went wide. That's impossible. My quirk isn't the only trick in town. Chromastone redirected the absorbed energy in a concentrated beam that hit Kurogyri dead center. The mist villain shrieked, an actual, pain sound, and was blown backward, his fog body scattering, reforming 20 yards away and visibly diminished. Go! Ben roared, and the class ran. 13 led the charge toward the exit, the students sprinting, some carrying others. Ida had scooped up Mineta, who'd frozen in terror, and Shoji was using his multiple arms to shield smaller students from debris. They poured through the entrance doors and into the daylight beyond. Not all of them made it. Kurogyri, battered but operational, managed one last desperate move, a warp gate that opened beneath a cluster of students before Chromastone could intercept it. Midoriya, Tsuyu, Todoroki, Bakugo, Kirishima, and 3 others dropped through and vanished, scattered into the facility's various zones. Ben saw it happen. Couldn't reach them in time. Chromastone's crystal fist closed on empty air where Midoriya had been standing a second ago. He turned to face the plaza below. Aizawa had already engaged. She dropped into the villain crowd like a bolt of dark lightning, capture weapon snaking out, quirks erasing left and right, fighting with a brutal efficiency that Ben recognized as the work of someone who'd spent years in the field. She was good. Incredibly good. But there were dozens of them, and she was one person, and the Nomu hadn't moved yet. Ben dropped the Chromastone form and went human, just for a second, assessing. Students scattered in the facility. Aizawa fighting alone below. Kurogyri regrouping. Shigaraki watching everything with those red eyes, scratching his neck, waiting. Choices. Priorities. He'd been making these calls since he was 10 years old. The students in the zones could handle themselves, they were UA students, they had their quirks, and they had each other. Midoriya had one for all now, even if he could barely control it. Todoroki could freeze an army. Bakugo was Bakugo. They'd survive long enough. The immediate threat was down in the plaza. Aizawa was going to get overwhelmed. And the Nomu, that thing was an all-might killer, and All Might wasn't here. Which meant someone else had to step up. Ben jumped the railing. He transformed on the way down, the green flash lighting up the dome like a flare. He chose Humongosaur, Vaxasaurian, 12 feet of dinosaur-like muscle and armored hide, built for exactly this kind of brawl. He hit the plaza floor like a mortar round, the impact cratering the tile, and the nearest cluster of villains scattered like bowling pins. He rose to his full height, tail sweeping 2 more off their feet, and roared, a sound that reverberated through the dome and made the water in the flood zone ripple. Evening, folks, Humongosaur rumbled. Who's first? They came at him in waves. Credit to the league, these weren't amateurs. They'd recruited heavy hitters for this operation. A man with stone skin threw a punch that would have caved in a car door. A woman generated blades of compressed air. Someone with a strength enhancement quirk tried to tackle Humongosaur at the knees. It didn't matter. Humungosaur caught the stone-skinned man's fist in one massive hand and squeezed. The stone cracked. The man screamed. Ben threw him into the airblade woman and they both went tumbling. The strength enhancer at his knees got a tail whip that launched him 30 feet into a decorative fountain with a splash that sent water cascading across the plaza. He grew. Humungosaur's ability to increase his size kicked in, and the Quirk energy boost amplified it. He went from 12 feet to 20, then 25, his armored hide thickening, his strength scaling proportionally. He was a dinosaur in a room full of mammals, and the evolutionary lesson was short. 4 villains rushed him from the right. He swept an arm through them like a man brushing crumbs off a table. 3 more came from the left, one with a fire quirk that lashed against his hide and did absolutely nothing. He stepped on the fire user's foot, carefully, with just enough force to pin, not to crush, and flicked him away with a finger. Aizawa, he called, spotting her across the plaza. She was bleeding from a cut above her eye, but still fighting, her capture weapon binding 2 villains at once while she kicked a third in the sternum. You good? Busy, she snapped back, and elbowed a villain in the throat without looking. He liked her. The villain crowd was thinning, Ben's assault had broken their formation, and the less committed among them were actively trying to flee. Kurogiri's warp gates opened here and there, evacuating the wounded and the terrified. In 3 minutes, the 70-strong force had been cut to maybe 20, and those 20 were having second thoughts. Shigaraki hadn't moved. He stood at the center of the chaos like a stone in rapids, watching Ben with those red eyes, and he was scratching his neck so hard it was bleeding. Nomu, Shigaraki said. The creature moved. It was fast. Way too fast for something that big. It crossed the distance between them in a blur, and its fist hit Humungosaur in the chest with a force that Ben felt in his bones, not just a punch, but an impact that carried the specific, engineered intent to kill. He flew backward. Hit a building. Went through the building. Concrete and steel collapsed around him as he cratered through the flood zone's retaining wall and into the shallow water beyond, sending a tidal wave across the artificial lake. Ben lay in the rubble for half a second, his Humungosaur form already healing the damage, and thought, okay. That thing hits hard. He'd been hit harder. Vilgax in his prime. A Gregor at full power. A hybrid war machine on a bad day. But the Nomu was in the conversation, and that meant taking it seriously. He climbed out of the wreckage, water streaming off his armored hide. The Nomu was already coming, charging across the plaza with the mindless, relentless momentum of a guided missile. Aizawa tried to intercept it, her capture weapon lashing around its arm, her quirk erasing whatever it had, but the Nomu pulled free with raw strength, barely slowing, its empty eyes fixed on Ben. Shigaraki laughed. It was an ugly sound. Do you like him? We made him special. Shock absorption, super regeneration, strength that matches all might. He was built to kill the symbol of peace. He scratched his neck, blood running down his collar. Let's see what he does to you. The Nomu reached Ben and threw another punch. Ben caught it. Humungosaur's massive hands closed around the Nomu's fist, and for a moment, they were locked, 2 titans straining against each other, the ground cracking beneath their feet. The Nomu's shock absorption was real. Ben could feel his force being dissipated, the creature's body absorbing the kinetic energy instead of taking damage. Shock absorption. Not nullification. It had a ceiling. Ben grinned, which was terrifying on a face full of dinosaur teeth. You absorb impacts, huh? Let's find out how much. He released the Nomu's fist and transformed. Green flash. The dome lit up. And where Humungosaur had stood, something new rose. Automix. The alien was humanoid, radiating with nuclear energy, his body a living reactor core sheathed in green and white armor. Power poured off him in visible waves, the air itself ionizing, the water in the flood zone beginning to steam. Automix was one of Ben's most powerful standard forms, a being that generated and controlled nuclear energy at a fundamental level. And in this world, boosted by ambient quirk energy, he was something else entirely. "Let's dance, big guy," Automix said, and his voice resonated with harmonic frequencies that made the dome's structural supports vibrate. The Nomu charged. Automix met it with a nuclear-powered uppercut that detonated on impact, not just physical force, but an explosion of contained nuclear energy that converted the kinetic impact into thermal, radiative, and electromagnetic damage simultaneously. Shock absorption handled kinetic force. It did not handle being hit with the equivalent of a tactical warhead. The Nomu went up. Straight up, through the dome's ceiling, punching a hole in the reinforced structure that let a column of sunlight stream down into the facility. Debris rained. The remaining villains stared at the hole in the ceiling with the expressions of people reassessing their life choices. Shigaraki's scratching stopped. His hand fell to his side. Behind the fingers of the hand mask, his red eyes were wide, and for the first time, the calculating confidence was gone. In its place was something raw, something animal. Fear. That's not, his voice cracked. Nomu was designed for all might. Nomu was supposed to be unstoppable. What are you? What are you? The Nomu fell back through the hole it had made, cratering into the plaza floor. Its body was scorched, skin peeling, the exposed brain sizzling. But it was regenerating, the flesh knitting back together, the damage reversing, because of course it could regenerate, they'd engineered it for redundancy. It stood up. Shook itself. Charged again. Ben could have ended it right there. Automix had the power. A sustained nuclear burst would overwhelm the regeneration, cook the creature at a cellular level, reduce it to ash. But there were students in this building. Scattered through the zones, fighting their own battles. A full-power Automix blast in an enclosed space would irradiate everything within a quarter mile. So he switched tactics. Green flash. Automix vanished. In his place, Big Chill. The Nomu's fist passed through him. Intangible. The creature stumbled, off balance, swinging at air. Ben phased behind it, solidified, and breathed. The freeze was different from what he'd done to the sludge villain. That had been a quick freeze, surface level, designed to immobilize. This was deep cold, absolute zero directed internally, the ice forming not on the Nomu's skin but inside it, crystallizing its blood, freezing its muscle fibers, turning its regeneration against it by making the newly grown tissue freeze as fast as it formed. The Nomu screamed. It was the first sound it had made, a raw, animal howl of something that could feel pain but not understand it. It thrashed, ice spreading across its body like white fire, its movement slowing as its internal temperature plummeted. Ben kept breathing. The cold intensified. The Nomu's regeneration fought back, cellular revival struggling against crystallization, a biological tug-of-war playing out in real time. For 10 seconds, it was a stalemate. Then the ice won. The Nomu froze solid. Not just the surface, all the way through. A statue of dark muscle and white frost, arms locked mid-flail, mouth open in a silent scream. Ben circled it once, confirming the freeze was total, and then materialized fully. Shock absorption, he said, looking at Shigaraki. Regeneration. Super strength. 3 abilities. Pretty good. But you built a weapon to fight one person, and I'm not that person. I'm about 1 million other people, and you didn't plan for any of them. Shigaraki was shaking. His whole body trembled, a vibration that ran from his fingertips to his shoulders, and his hand was back on his neck, scratching, the skin raw and bloody. The remaining villains, maybe 10 of them, had pulled back, clustered near Kurogiri, ready to run. This isn't fair, Shigaraki whispered. This wasn't, the plan was, we planned for all might, we had data, we had, plans don't survive contact with the enemy, Ben said. Lesson 1. Shigaraki's trembling stopped. The fear in his eyes crystallized into something harder, something that would grow and calcify and become very dangerous over time. He looked at Ben, really looked, the way a predator memorizes the thing that hurt it, and when he spoke, his voice was steady. "Kurogyri. Get us out." "But Shigaraki, now." The mist swirled. Warp gates opened behind the remaining villains, purple-black portals that swallowed them in groups. Shigaraki was the last to go, standing at the edge of his portal, eyes locked on Ben. "I'll remember this," Shigaraki said. "I'll remember you. And next time, bring more," Ben said. "It'll be more interesting." Shigaraki vanished. The portal closed. The dome was silent except for the distant sounds of students fighting in the zones, sounds that were already dying down as the scattered villain squads realized their leadership had abandoned them. Ben powered down. Human again, standing in a ruined plaza, the frozen Nomu towering behind him like a monument. He took a breath. The air tasted like ozone and concrete dust. "Aizawa?" She was on the ground. He saw her and moved fast. She was conscious but badly hurt, her right arm clearly broken where the Nomu had caught her during its charge. Her capture weapon was tangled around her, bloodied. But her eyes were open, sharp, and when Ben knelt beside her, she managed a look of pure professional assessment. "The students," she said. "Let's go get them." He found them in the zones, one group at a time. The flood zone first. Midoriya, Tsuyu, and Mineta had been dumped there. Midoriya was standing thigh-deep in water, fists clenched, a group of unconscious villains floating around him. Tsuyu, the frog girl, as Ben had mentally catalogued her, was perched on a boat, looking entirely unruffled. Mineta was crying. "Ben." Midoriya's face split into a grin of pure relief. "You're okay." "We heard the explosions and I thought, I'm fine." "You took down these guys yourselves." "Tsuchan did most of the work," Midoriya said, and the frog girl's tongue flicked out in what Ben was learning was a Tsuyu smile. "Her mobility in water is incredible." He punched a villain through a wall," Tsuyu said flatly. "With his finger." "Then he broke his finger." Ben looked at Midoriya's hand. The index finger was swollen and purple. "One for all." "I'm working on control," Midoriya said, with a sheepish wince. "We'll talk about that later." "Can you move?" "Absolutely." The landslide zone. Todoroki had single-handedly frozen every villain in his section. They were stuck to the rocky terrain like flies in amber, and Todoroki was sitting on a boulder, completely composed, not a hair out of place. He looked at Ben with those heterochromatic eyes, one gray, one blue, split down the middle by a burn scar that told a story Ben wasn't going to ask about yet. "You dealt with the main threat," Todoroki said. "Not a question. The big one's on ice." "Literally." The ghost of something, not quite a smile, but adjacent, crossed Todoroki's face. "Appropriate." The ruined zone. Bakugo and Kirishima had gone full berserker, and the results were impressive. Villains were scattered across the rubble like confetti, and Bakugo was standing in the middle of it all, palms smoking, breathing hard, looking furious at the universe for not providing more things to blow up. He saw Ben and his fury focused to a point. "Where the hell were you?" Bakugo snarled. "We had it handled." "I can see that. I didn't need your help." "I don't need anyone's help. Especially not from some freak with a knockoff quirk, Bakugo." Ben said it calmly, evenly, the way you talk to a live wire. "You did good. Your classmates are safe because you fought. That's what matters." Bakugo's mouth opened. Closed. His palms crackled. For a second, Ben thought he was going to take a swing. Then Bakugo turned away with a sound like a kettle reaching boil and stalked toward the exit, leaving small explosions in his footprints. "He's like that," Kirishima said apologetically, flexing a hand that had been hardened into a rocky blade. "But he's actually, he is like that," but underneath okay, he's just like that. But he's brave. I know, Ben said. I've seen it. He gathered them all. 20 students, some bruised, some shaken, all alive. They converged in the ruined plaza, staring at the frozen Nomu, at the wreckage, at the hole in the ceiling that was still letting in a column of afternoon light. Midoriya stood next to Ben, cradling his broken finger, and looked at the Nomu with an expression that mixed awe and horror. That thing was really meant to kill All Might? Yeah. And you stopped it. Froze it. We'll need to figure out containment. The internal freeze will hold for a while, but its regeneration is strong. If it thaws, it'll start healing. Ben. Midoriya's voice was quiet, just for the two of them. If you hadn't been here, but I was. If you hadn't, then Aizawa would have fought until she couldn't. And you would have fought after that. And Todoroki, and Bakugo, and Tsuyu, and every single one of these kids. You would have found a way, Midoriya. That's what heroes do. Midoriya opened his mouth. Closed it. Nodded, slowly, and his jaw tightened with a resolve that hadn't been there 2 weeks ago. The cavalry arrived 12 minutes later. All Might came first, bursting through the USJ's main doors in his muscular form, eyes blazing, fists clenched, radiating a fury so intense that the air pressure in the dome actually shifted. He took in the scene, the unconscious villains, the destroyed plaza, the frozen Nomu, the students clustered together, Aizawa injured on the ground, and his smile, for the first time in Ben's experience, had no warmth in it. It was the smile of a man who'd arrived too late and was angry about it. The students, he said, and his voice shook with controlled emotion. Are they? Everyone's accounted for, Ben said. Injuries are minor. Aizawa needs medical attention, broken arm, possible concussion. The villain force has withdrawn through warp gates. Their leader, Shigaraki Tamura, and the warp villain Kurojiri escaped. The remaining foot soldiers are unconscious and scattered through the zones. All Might looked at Ben. In his muscular form, he towered over everyone, but the eyes behind the grin were Toshinori Yagi's, tired, frightened, grateful. The Nomu? All Might asked. Frozen. It's engineered, shock absorption, regeneration, enhanced strength. It was built to fight you. Multiple quirks in one body. All Might's expression darkened. Multiple quirks. Then it's his work. Whose? A conversation for later. Somewhere private. All Might turned to the students. The warmth returned to his smile, forced, but convincing. The symbol of peace, doing what the symbol of peace did. Young heroes. You've done magnificently today. You faced a crisis, and you rose to meet it. I am proud of every single one of you. The students sagged with relief. Uraraka burst into tears. Kirishima pumped a fist. Even Todoroki's posture loosened, just slightly. They were kids, powerful, brave kids, but kids, and they needed to hear that it was over. That they'd done enough. More heroes arrived. The police. EMTs. Recovery girl, muttering darkly about reckless teenagers as she triaged the injured. The media descended on the exterior of the USJ like vultures, and Nizu, who'd appeared from somewhere with his tiny teacup still in hand, began managing the narrative with a cheerful ruthlessness that Ben admired. In the controlled chaos, Ben found a quiet spot, a bench at the edge of the plaza, behind a column, out of the immediate bustle. He sat down and let himself feel it. Not the fight. The fight was easy. The fight was always easy. What came after was the part that cost, the adrenaline crash, the delayed fear, the inventory of what could have gone wrong. Students could have died. Aizawa could have died. If the Nomu had been even slightly more powerful, or if there had been two of them, or if Kurojiri had successfully scattered all the students, he didn't follow the thread. He'd learned not to. You couldn't save everyone by thinking about the times you didn't. Footsteps. Light, hesitant. He looked up. Todoroki stood there, arms at his sides, face unreadable. He looked at Ben for a moment without speaking. Then he sat down on the other end of the bench, leaving a careful gap between them. Silence. Not uncomfortable. Just two people who didn't need to fill space with sound. You weren't afraid, Todoroki said eventually. Not of the fight. What, then? Ben thought about it. Gave an honest answer. That I wouldn't be fast enough. That one of you would get hurt while I was dealing with the big threat. Being powerful doesn't mean much if you can't be in two places at once. Todoroki absorbed this. His right hand, the ice side, was resting on his knee, and frost patterns were spreading unconsciously from his fingertips across the bench surface. My father would say power is all that matters. That being the strongest solves everything. Your father sounds like he's wrong about a lot of things. Todoroki turned to look at him, and for just a second, the mask cracked. Something raw flickered in those mismatched eyes, surprise, recognition, the gut punch of being seen by someone who didn't look away. Yeah, Todoroki said quietly. He is. They sat there while the heroes and police did their work, and the afternoon light streaming through the hole in the ceiling shifted from gold to orange. Ben didn't push. Some walls came down on their own schedule. Eventually, Todoroki stood. For what it's worth, he said, not quite looking at Ben, I'm glad you were here today. For what it's worth, you held your zone alone against a squad of villains and didn't break a sweat. You didn't need me. Something complicated moved across Todoroki's face. Then he walked away, and Ben noticed that the frost on the bench had melted on the left side, the fire side, as if something warm had briefly, involuntarily, surfaced. The debrief happened that evening, in Nizu's office, with a smaller group, Nizu, All Might, in his diminished form, Aizawa, arm in a cast, both eyes bandaged from an injury Ben hadn't noticed during the fight, and Ben. 4 people and a truth that needed to be spoken. All for one, All Might said. The name landed in the room like a stone in still water. He's the one behind this. Behind the League. Behind Shigaraki. Behind the Nomu. All Might's gaunt face was drawn tight with a history of pain that Ben could only partially read. He's the original villain. The first person to possess multiple quirks, through a stolen ability that lets him take and give quirks at will. He's been alive for over 200 years, operating in the shadows, and he is the most dangerous human being on the planet. The Nomu had multiple quirks, Ben said. Shock absorption, regeneration, strength enhancement. You're saying this all for one gave those to it? Engineered it? Created it? The Nomu is a human being, or was, modified with multiple forced quirk transplants, brain destroyed in the process, turned into a living weapon. All Might's hands were shaking. He gripped his knees to stop them. I fought All for One years ago. I won, but the cost, he gestured at his own diminished body. This is what his victory looks like. And now he's back, or he never left, and he's building an army. He's also interested in Tennyson, Nizu said, and every head turned. The principal pulled up a file on his tablet, intelligence reports, surveillance intercepts, data that Ben didn't ask how Nizu had obtained. Since the sludge villain incident, the League has been gathering information on you. Your abilities, your patterns, your known associates. The level of interest is unusual, even for them. The Omnitrix, Ben said. He wants the Omnitrix. A device that grants access to over 1 million different biological power sets, Nizu said. For a man whose quirk revolves around stealing and collecting abilities. You're not just interesting to him, Mr. Tennyson. You're irresistible. The room was quiet. Ben looked at the Omnitrix on his wrist, its green glow steady in the dim office. He can't take it, Ben said. The Omnitrix is bonded to my DNA. It can't be removed, can't be stolen, can't be replicated. Believe me, people have tried. People who make this all for one sound like a pickpocket. All for one doesn't need to remove it, All Might said, and his voice was heavy with the knowledge of a man who'd spent his life fighting an enemy who always found a way. He just needs to control the person wearing it. Or destroy them and build something from what's left. Then he's going to be disappointed on both counts. Ben said it without bravado, without anger. Just fact. I've been a target before. I've had warlords, dictators, and gods try to take what I have. They're all gone, and I'm still here. This isn't your universe, Aizawa said. Her voice was muffled by the bandages but sharp as ever. You don't know this enemy. I know his type. And his type always makes the same mistake. They think the watch is the threat. He tapped the Omnitrix. It's not. It's just a tool. I'm the threat. And the sooner he figures that out, the worse his day gets. All Might looked at Ben for a long time. Then he laughed, a real laugh, not the booming All Might performance, but Toshinori Yagi's genuine, surprised, exhausted laughter. You really are something, Tennyson. So I've been told. Nizu cleared his throat. In light of today's events, I'm accelerating your integration into UA's structure. You'll be formally attached to Class 1A as an auxiliary, a teaching assistant, in effect, though the term is laughably inadequate. You'll have access to all class activities, training exercises, and facilities. The Hero Commission will be informed, and they will not be pleased, and I will enjoy their displeasure immensely. And all for one? Aizawa asked. We prepare, Nizu said simply. We train the students. We strengthen our defenses. And we keep our eyes open. He looked at Ben. All of us. The meeting ended. They filed out, each carrying the weight of what they'd learned. In the hallway, All Might caught Ben's arm, his grip weak, his hand thin, but his eyes burning. Protect them, All Might said. The students. Midoriya. If something happens to me, if I can't, nothing's going to happen to you. Ben. The use of his first name was deliberate. Intimate. The voice of a man staring at his own mortality. I'm running out of time. You know it. I know it. My power is fading, and when it's gone, the symbol of peace dies. And when the symbol dies, the vultures come. Ben held his gaze. Then we'll build something the vultures can't eat. The kid, Midoriya, he's going to surpass you, All Might. I've seen it. Not because of One for All. Because of who he is. And until he's ready, I'll hold the line. All Might's thin face worked through emotions too complex to name. He released Ben's arm, stepped back, and for just a moment, a heartbeat, a flicker, his diminished form seemed to straighten, to fill out, as if the ghost of his power was responding to someone else's conviction. Thank you, he said, and walked away into the darkened corridor. Ben stood alone in the hallway of UA, the Omnitrix humming on his wrist, and thought about symbols and shadows and a man with no face who collected powers like a dragon hoarded gold. His phone buzzed. Midoriya, are you okay? I heard you fought the Nomu alone. Everyone's saying you punched it through the ceiling. Ben typed back, I'm fine. How's the finger? Recovery girl healed it. She hit me with a cane afterward and told me to stop breaking my bones. Solid advice. Ben. Today was scary. Really scary. I felt useless. I could barely fight, I broke myself just throwing one punch, and you and Aizawa-sensei did everything. Ben stared at the message. He could give comfort. Tell Midoriya it was fine, that he'd done his best, that growth took time. All true. But Midoriya didn't need comfortable. He needed honest. He typed, you're right. Today, you weren't strong enough. Your control over One for All is non-existent and every time you use it you destroy yourself. That has to change. Starting tomorrow, we train. Not the beach. Not endurance. Combat. Control. You have the most powerful quirk in the world inside you, and you're using it like a grenade when it should be a scalpel. We're going to fix that. A long pause. Then, tomorrow. I'll be there. 5 a.m. Ground beta. I'll be there at 4:30. Ben smiled, pocketed the phone, and walked to the dormitory through the quiet campus. Somewhere in the distance, recovery crews were still working at the USJ, cataloging damage, transporting the frozen Nomu to a containment facility, piecing together the forensics of the attack. Somewhere further away, in a room that didn't exist, a man with no face was receiving a report. The Nomu, his weapon, his masterpiece, defeated. Not by all might, as anticipated, but by an unknown variable with an impossible device. A device that could not be stolen by conventional means. All for One considered this. He was patient. He had been patient for 2 centuries, through wars, through societal upheavals, through the rise and fall of every hero who'd ever tried to stop him. Patience was his greatest weapon, more reliable than any stolen quirk, more potent than any engineered Nomu. The boy with the watch was powerful. More powerful than anticipated. But power, in All for One's experience, was always acquirable. The method simply needed to be adjusted. He began to plan. And in the dormitory of Heights Alliance, Ben Tennyson lay in bed, staring at the green glow of the Omnitrix on his ceiling, and began to plan too. The game had changed. The enemy had a face, or rather, a deliberate absence of one, and the stakes were no longer just about finding a way home. There were students who trusted him. A fading hero who needed him. A world that didn't know it was standing on the edge of something terrible. Ben had stood on edges before. The trick was to jump first and figure out the landing on the way down. He rolled over, closed his eyes, and slept the deep, easy sleep of someone who knew exactly who he was and what he was going to do about it. Tomorrow, the work began. Chapter 4, The Sports Festival and the Shadow, continued, and refused to break. Bakugo stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard, palms smoking, and his expression was something Ben had never seen on him before. Not triumph. Not anger. Something closer to respect, buried under layers of pride and fury that Bakugo would rather die than acknowledge openly. He turned toward the tunnel without a word. No celebration. No posturing. As he passed the spot where the medics were loading Uraraka onto a stretcher, his steps slowed, just fractionally, barely enough to notice, and then he kept walking. Ben filed it away. There was a human being in there, underneath all that nitroglycerin and rage. It just took a hell of a fight to bring it to the surface. The matches rolled on. Ida defeated Hatsum, though defeated was generous. Hatsum spent the entire fight using him as a mannequin to demonstrate her support equipment to the industry professionals in the crowd, then cheerfully stepped out of bounds when she'd gotten enough screen time. Ida stood in the arena afterward with the expression of a man who'd just been mugged by someone handing out business cards. Kirishima and Tetsutetsu, 2 hardening quirks, functionally identical, beat each other senseless in a brawl so straightforward it was almost beautiful. They ended up settling it with arm wrestling after punching each other to a double knockout. Kirishima won, barely, and then helped Tetsutetsu to his feet, and they walked out of the arena with their arms around each other's shoulders like old war buddies. Tokoyami dismantled Yaoyorozu with clinical precision, Dark Shadow overwhelming her ability to create countermeasures before she could formulate a strategy. Kaminari fried himself trying to go full power against Shiozaki's vine quirk and stumbled around the arena giving thumbs up to no one while she calmly wrapped him in vines and deposited him out of bounds. And then the semi-finals bracket materialized on the screens, and the stadium noise dropped to a hush that vibrated with anticipation. Midoriya vs Todoroki. Bakugo vs Tokoyami. Ben looked at the bracket. Then at Midoriya, who was in the waiting area, Recovery Girl having just finished with his broken fingers. The kid was staring at Todoroki's name on the screen with an expression that wasn't fear, it was something more complicated, something that had been building since the cavalry battle. He only uses his ice, Midoriya said when Ben sat down next to him. Not a question. A statement, delivered with the quiet intensity of someone who'd been analyzing a puzzle and was getting close to the answer. His right side only. Even when it puts him at a disadvantage, even when using fire would make things easier, he refuses. At the cavalry battle, when he almost lost, I saw his left side smoke for just a second before he shut it down. You know why? His father. Endeavor. Midoriya's jaw tightened. The number 2 hero. The man who bred Todoroki. A quirk marriage, designed to produce a child with both ice and fire. Todoroki told me. In the waiting room, before the matches. He told me everything, his father's obsession with surpassing all might, his mother's abuse at Endeavor's hands, the boiling water, his voice cracked. He told me he'd win the festival using only his mother's power. That he'd reject everything his father gave him. And what do you think about that? I think he's in pain. I think he's so focused on rejecting his father that he's rejecting part of himself. And I think, Midoriya looked at his own scarred hands. I think when we fight, I need to make him use it. Not for his father. For himself. Ben was quiet for a moment. Then he said, that might cost you the match. I know. You're okay with that? Midoriya looked up, and his green eyes were clear. Being a hero isn't about winning fights, Ben. You taught me that. It's about saving people. Even when they don't know they need saving. Ben leaned back. Crossed his arms. Looked at this kid, this quirkless, stubborn, brilliant, self-sacrificing kid who'd cried on a park bench 7 months ago because the world had told him he was nothing, and felt something warm and fierce settle in his chest. Go save him, then. The fight was a masterpiece. It started as a mismatch. Todoroki opened with a glacier, a wave of ice so massive it overflowed the arena and crept into the stands, forcing spectators to their feet. It was a statement, an overwhelming display of power that said I don't need fire. I don't need anything but this. Midoriya charged through it. One for all at 5%, the trickle of power he'd been training to sustain, the fraction of his full strength that didn't destroy his body. He punched through ice walls, dodged ice spires, closed distance with the desperate speed of someone who knew that staying at range meant losing. The cold was brutal, his skin was going blue, his movement slowing, but he kept coming. He got close enough to land a flick. One finger, 5% of one for all focused into the smallest possible point, and the shockwave hit Todoroki in the chest and sent him skidding backward. Fight me for real. Midoriya yelled, and his voice cut through the stadium noise like a blade. Stop holding back. You think rejecting your father means cutting yourself in half? That fire isn't his, it's yours. It's part of you. Todoroki's face contorted. Ice surged again, bigger than before, and Midoriya punched through it again, breaking his finger this time, the shockwave shattering the glacier into a billion crystals that caught the stadium lights and turned the arena into a snow globe. Shut up. Todoroki's composure was cracking, the ice on his right side going haywire, forming without direction, spiking in random directions. You don't know anything about, I know what it's like to feel like you're not enough. Midoriya was bleeding now, his right hand a wreck, 3 fingers broken, but he was still standing, still moving forward. I know what it's like to have something inside you that you're afraid of. But you can't be a hero if you're only half of who you are. Todoroki froze. Not his quirk, he froze, his whole body going still, and behind his mismatched eyes something was happening. Something deep and tectonic, a fault line that had been building pressure for 16 years. Your power, Midoriya said, and he was crying now, tears streaming down his bruised face, but his voice was iron. It's yours. Not his. Yours. So use it. Todoroki's left side ignited. The heat was instantaneous and enormous, a pillar of fire that erupted from his left arm and shoulder, spiraling into the sky, melting the ice that covered the arena in a wave of steam that turned the whole battlefield into a sauna. Todoroki stood at the center of it, fire on one side, ice on the other, and the expression on his face was something Ben had seen on the faces of people freed from prisons. Liberation. Terrible, overwhelming, intoxicating liberation. In the stands, Endeavor, the number 2 hero, a massive man wreathed in his own flames, surged to his feet. Yes. That's it, Shoto. That's my boy. You finally, it wasn't for him. Todoroki didn't look at him. Didn't acknowledge him. The fire was pointed at Midoriya, and Todoroki's eyes were locked on the battered, bleeding boy who'd punched through a glacier to reach him. Thank you, Todoroki said, so quietly the microphones barely caught it. Then he attacked with everything. Both sides. Full power. The collision was cataclysmic. Midnight called for Cementos to erect barriers. The stadium shook. A combined blast of fire and ice met a one-for-all punch that Midoriya threw with his entire broken right arm, every finger shattering, the bones splintering, the shockwave meeting Todoroki's dual-element assault in the center of the arena. The explosion blew them both out of bounds. When the dust settled, Midoriya was unconscious, embedded in the stadium wall, his right arm a mangled ruin. Todoroki was on his knees just outside the boundary line, breathing hard, steam rising from his entire body, his left side still flickering with residual flame. Midnight's flag went up. Todoroki advances by ring out. Midoriya is eliminated. The crowd was on its feet. Not cheering for a winner, cheering for both of them, for the fight itself, for the raw, honest, soul-deep spectacle they'd just witnessed. Present Mike was screaming into his microphone. Even Aizawa, in the faculty area, had uncrossed her arms. Ben was already moving. He vaulted the observation railing, dropped to the arena floor, and reached Midoriya before the medics did. The kid was a mess. Right arm shattered, multiple fingers on his left hand broken, bruises layered over bruises, hypothermia setting in from prolonged ice exposure. But he was conscious, barely, his green eyes flickering open as Ben knelt beside him. Did he? Midoriya whispered. Did he use it? Yeah, kid. He used it. Midoriya smiled. It was the most broken, beautiful, heroic thing Ben had seen in 2 worlds. Then I won, Midoriya said, and passed out. Recovery Girl took over, her healing quirk knitting bone and tissue with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been repairing reckless teenagers for decades. She shot Ben a look that contained volumes of commentary about the kind of training that produced students willing to shatter their own limbs for a point. Don't look at me, Ben said. I've been teaching him to avoid breaking himself. Then teach harder, Recovery Girl said, and kissed Midoriya's forehead. In the waiting area between matches, Ben found Todoroki. The kid was sitting on a bench, head in his hands, steam still wisping from his left side. He'd stopped the fire, but the warmth lingered, and his whole body had the loose, drained quality of someone who just let go of something they'd been clenching for years. Ben sat next to him. Didn't say anything. The silence stretched, and it was the same quality of silence they'd shared on the bench after the USJ, comfortable, patient, empty of obligation. I called my mother, Todoroki said eventually. His voice was rough. She's in a hospital. Has been for years. Since he touched the scar over his left eye. I haven't visited her. I was afraid. And now. I'm going to visit her. After the festival. He lifted his head. His eyes were red, but dry. Midoriya saved me. He broke himself to pieces to save me, and he doesn't even know me. He knows enough. He knows you were hurting, and he could help. That's all it takes for someone like him. Someone like him. A hero. The real kind. Todoroki looked at him. Something had shifted behind those mismatched eyes, the wall was still there, but there were cracks now, and through the cracks, light. Are you the real kind? Todoroki asked. I try to be. Todoroki nodded slowly. Then he stood, straightened his uniform, and walked toward the arena tunnel. At the threshold, he paused without turning. Ben. Yeah. Thank you. For what you said at the USJ. About my father being wrong. A beat. He is. But I think maybe I was wrong about some things too. He walked into the tunnel, and Ben sat in the quiet and let the moment breathe. The semi-finals and finals played out with the inevitable intensity of a tournament designed to showcase the best. Todoroki fought Bakugo in the final, and it was explosive, literally, given Bakugo's quirk, but something was off. Todoroki, still reeling from his emotional breakthrough against Midoriya, couldn't sustain his fire. It flickered in and out, unstable, a newly unlocked power without the muscle memory to maintain it under pressure. Bakugo, sensing weakness with the predatory instinct that made him terrifying, pressed the advantage relentlessly. The final ended with Bakugo blasting Todoroki out of bounds. First place. The victory he declared from the first moment of the festival. He was furious about it. He wasn't fighting at full power. Bakugo raged during the medal ceremony, literally chained to the podium because he tried to refuse the gold medal. That half-and-half bastard held back. I didn't win, he lost. That's not the same thing. I want a rematch. I want, young Bakugo, All Might said, in his muscular form, placing the medal around Bakugo's neck while the boy thrashed. Accept your victory with grace. I'll kill you. That's not grace. Ben watched from the sidelines and laughed until his ribs hurt. The festival wound down. The crowds dispersed. The stadium emptied slowly, like a bathtub draining, leaving behind crushed cups and forgotten programs and the lingering electricity of a day that had changed things. Changed Todoroki, certainly. Changed how the world saw Midoriya. Changed Bakugo, though the explosive boy would chew off his own hand before admitting it. And changed something else. Something Ben became aware of only as the sun began to set and the campus settled into post-festival quiet. It started with his phone. A text from Nizu, my office. Now, please. Bring your watch. The please was a courtesy. The now was not. He found Nizu in his office, but the principal wasn't alone. Tsukachi Naomasa, a detective Ben had met during the USJ investigation, a lean man with honest eyes and a quirk that functioned as a lie detector, sat in one of the visitor chairs, a file folder thick enough to be a weapon resting on his lap. All Might was there in his diminished form, standing by the window. And Aizawa, arm still in its sling, leaning against the wall by the door. The atmosphere was wrong. Not hostile, but heavy. The air of people who'd been discussing something serious for a while before Ben arrived. Sit down, Mr. Tennyson, Nizu said, and he wasn't smiling. Ben had never seen Nizu not smiling. The absence of it was more alarming than anything else in the room. He sat. What happened? Tsukachi opened the file. Over the past 3 weeks, 5 pro-heroes have been attacked in the Hosu district. All 5 survived, but all 5 were left in critical condition. The attacker used a bladed weapon, targeted specific points on their bodies, and left a message at each scene. He pulled out photographs, crime scene shots, bloody concrete, and words carved into walls. The hero killer, Stain. Ben looked at the photographs. The carved messages were manifestos, short, sharp declarations about false heroes, corrupt systems, the sickness of a society that turned heroism into commerce. The handwriting was jagged and precise, the work of someone who believed every word enough to write it in other people's blood. Stain is a zealot, Tsukachi continued. Former vigilante, radicalized over the past several years. His ideology is simple, most pro-heroes are fakes. They're in it for money, fame, glory. Not for the act of saving people. He's appointed himself as the judge of who deserves the title, and his judgment is lethal. He's killing heroes he thinks are frauds, Ben said. Paralyzing, mostly. His quirk allows him to immobilize anyone whose blood he ingests. He cuts them, licks the blade, and they're frozen. Then he decides whether they live or die based on his own criteria. And his criteria? Unclear, but consistent. Heroes motivated primarily by money or status are targets. Heroes motivated by genuine desire to save others are spared. Tsukachi paused. There's a pattern in his target selection that concerns us. He pulled out another sheet, a map, red dots marking attack locations, connected by lines that formed a rough triangle converging on a single point. He's moving toward Hosu City's central district. Pro-hero Ingenium, the turbo hero, engaged him 2 nights ago. Ingenium is currently in intensive care with a severed spinal cord. He may never walk again. The room was very quiet. Ben looked at the name. Ingenium. Something clicked. Ida, he said. Tenya Ida. Ingenium is, his older brother, All Might confirmed, his voice heavy. Young Ida received the news last night. He's not handling it well. Ben thought about Ida, the rigid, earnest, rule-following kid who chopped the air when he talked and ran like a Formula One car and believed in the system with the kind of faith that only the young and untested could sustain. He thought about what happened when that faith got shattered by a blade across a brother's spine. Ida's going to go after him, Ben said. That's our concern, Nizu said. The work-study placements begin this week. Students will be dispatched to various hero agencies across the city for field experience. If Ida selects an agency in the Hosu district, he will. He'll put himself as close to Stain as possible. And when he finds him, he'll try to fight, and he'll lose, because he'll be fighting angry and Stain is a professional killer who's beaten full-fledged pros. Which is why, Nizu said, and his eyes were sharp, I'm assigning you to Hosu. Ben raised an eyebrow. Officially? Semi-officially. The Hero Commission has provisionally authorized your field deployment in a support capacity. You'll be attached to the Hosu operation as an independent asset, coordinating with local heroes and police. Your stated objective is observation and readiness. Nizu's non-smile sharpened into something that was almost its opposite, a blade, thin and bright. Your actual objective is to ensure that Stain does not kill any more heroes, and that our students, Ida in particular, survive whatever foolishness they're about to commit. There's something else, Tsukachi said. He pulled the last item from his file, a surveillance photograph, grainy, taken from a security camera. It showed a dark alleyway, and in the alleyway, 2 figures. One was Stain, lean, wrapped in bandages, a bandana covering the lower half of his face, a blade glinting in his hand. The other figure was wreathed in dark mist. Kurojairi. The League of Villains has made contact with Stain, Tsukachi said. We don't know the nature of the relationship, Stain's ideology doesn't align neatly with Shigaraki's, and preliminary intelligence suggests Stain rejected their initial recruitment attempt. But the contact happened, and the League's involvement in Hosu means Hosu isn't just about one serial killer, Ben finished. The League is planning something bigger. Stain is either a pawn or a distraction or both, and whatever Shigaraki's got cooked up, he's going to use the chaos of Stain's rampage as cover. That is our assessment, yes, Nizu said. Ben looked at the photograph of Kurojairi and Stain. 2 dangers, overlapping. A zealot with a blade and a nihilist with an army, both converging on a city full of civilians and a teenager who was about to do something brave and stupid in the name of his brother. I'll handle it, Ben said. I know you will. Nizu's smile returned, small, contained, but genuine. That's why I'm sending you. The meeting ended. Tsukachi left with his file. All Might lingered, catching Ben in the hallway. The League's interest in you hasn't diminished, Toshinori said quietly. The intelligence Tsukachi showed us, the Kurojairi contact with Stain, that's the visible layer. Underneath it, All for One is still maneuvering. He's patient, Ben. More patient than you can imagine. Everything that's happening, the League's growth, the NOMA project, Stain, the USJ, it's all pieces of a larger game, and he's the only one who can see the whole board. Then we take his pieces off it. One at a time. Ben met All Might's eyes. Starting with Hosu. Toshinori nodded. But his gaunt face carried a shadow that hadn't been there before the festival, a weariness that went beyond physical decline. He was running out of time, and they both knew it, and the enemies were not slowing down. Be careful, Toshinori said. Careful's overrated, Ben replied. But I'll be smart. That's better. He went back to his dormitory room and packed light. The work-study placement started in 2 days. He'd be in Hosu by Wednesday. He checked the Omnitrix before bed. The return vector calculation had climbed to 21%. Slow. Steady. Still no timeline. The green glow pulsed in the dark room, a heartbeat from another universe, and for a moment, just a moment, Ben let himself feel the distance. The light years, the dimensional barriers, the impossible gap between here and home. Gwen was out there somewhere, in a reality he couldn't reach, probably furious and terrified and turning the multiverse inside out to find him. Grandpa Max, pacing, planning, refusing to give up. Kevin, pretending he didn't care while quietly tearing apart every dimensional scanner he could get his hands on. They were looking for him. He knew they were. And he'd get back to them. But right now, in this moment, in this world, his phone buzzed. Midoriya, I heard you're going to Hosu. Is it about Ida-kun? Ben typed, partly. I'll keep an eye on him. He's hurting, Ben. I've never seen him like this. He's quiet. He's too quiet. I know. That's the dangerous kind. Promise me you'll protect him. Ben stared at the message. Thought about promises, and what they cost, and how many he'd made over the years. Thought about a quirkless kid who asked for other people's safety before his own, every single time. He typed, I promise. Then he turned off the phone, lay back, and stared at the ceiling. Hosu was waiting. Stain was waiting. The League was waiting. And somewhere in the dark, behind walls of steel and stone and 200 years of accumulated malice, All for One was waiting too. But Ben Tennyson didn't keep people waiting long. He closed his eyes, and slept, and dreamed of green light.